let's get into this.
Today we're talking about the USS Barb. Commissioned in 1942, it is a Gato-class diesel-electric-powered submarine. Serving in a total of 12 war patrols, it is credited with the sinking of 17 enemy ships. Amongst those ships was a frigate, a cruiser, and an entire aircraft carrier. And if you don't know what any of that means, they're really big ships. Big ships means a big deal.
Okay, yes, all that true. World War II, naval battles, that was the birth of the super-powered, like, aircraft carriers. That's when aircraft carriers really got out there for the first time, and they showed their strength. Before then, there were a few experimental aircraft carriers where they would have a runway kind of built onto the side of a ship, like a battleship or something like that, and they could launch maybe one or two biplanes. And at that point, all they were useful for was scouts, and they really weren't that useful, because as soon as that ship took damage, that runway was broken, and you couldn't launch any more ships. Or, sorry, you couldn't launch any more planes. So, but when World War II rolled around, like before World War II came around, we started building up these aircraft carriers, but they weren't tested. We knew they should be useful, like they had a lot of potential, but they never saw combat yet. Or not yet. Haven't seen combat yet. But they were very, very strategically important. So when Pearl Harbor happened, the Japanese came in and they sank a whole bunch of boats. They didn't sink any carriers. The Japanese admiral in charge of it said that that was a massive, massive problem, because he knew how potentially dangerous and how potentially important aircraft carriers would be in the coming war. And he wanted as many of those down as possible. And he told the pilots that. But the pilots, at this point in time, these aircraft carriers haven't been used. Battleships were the big thing. So the pilots, they've never seen aircraft carriers in use, but they've seen battleships just absolutely destroyed. And Fat Electrician's got a good video on, I think it's the USS Texas. So if you want to see how much power a battleship has, that's why they were so scared of them. So when they went out to Pearl Harbor, the Japanese admiral said that his pilots were battleship happy. They were just hunting down battleships. They targeted battleships. They weren't even really looking for the aircraft carriers. Now at that point at Pearl Harbor, we got exceedingly lucky, or if you want to go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, we kind of knew about it already. I don't buy it, but it's a fun theory. There were no aircraft carriers in Pearl Harbor when it got hit. They were all out either doing routine training or whatever else they were doing, but they weren't in port that day. So they never got hit. And because of that, we weren't absolutely destroyed. We had a few major assets, being aircraft carriers, that could help defend that coastline. Now, that means we've lost a lot of our foreign territories, a lot of our island bases and stuff like that, because those carriers, once the battleships were knocked out, once all these other large ships were knocked out, they didn't have the aircraft carrier group, those other ships that would go with the carriers to protect the carriers. So if the carriers went out on the offensive, they'd be lost, because they're very, very useful. They're very dangerous, but they're kind of glass cannons, which is why you surround them with defensive ships. And yeah, the USS Barb sank a carrier, which for a submarine to sink an aircraft carrier is a huge deal. For anybody to sink an aircraft carrier is a huge deal. Every time, there was only a handful of aircraft carriers at any given time. So one sinking was a very blatant, like, these people won this major battle. Like, that's what sinking an aircraft carrier is. And for a submarine to do it at this point, World War II, submarines were either lone wolf or wolf pack tactics. So lone wolf, they would go out by themselves, do their thing, mostly sitting and waiting in trade lanes, or wolf packs. 2 or 3 or 4 submarines move as a group and assist each other to take down as many targets as possible, as fast as possible, before dipping out. So that's not a major naval engagement. That is a sneak attack, surprise, hit and run sort of a deal. For one or two submarines to take on an entire aircraft carrier and sink it is a huge deal. And the USS Barb did that.
Science. Here's the thing though, that 17, that's just the actual enemy navy that it sunk. If you want to see the actual damage they did,
Yeah, that flag is insane. So, at this point, World War II, the American government or military, whoever, declared essentially total war because Japan was playing total war rules. So, any Japanese vessel, any vessel flying a Japanese flag, carrying Japanese military or civilians, was considered a valid target. So, under these rules, you would, of course, prioritize sinking military assets like destroyers, minesweepers, aircraft carriers, battleships, if you can. That would, of course, be the priority. But by allowing the military to go after, to hunt, and to sink civilian vessels, the civilian vessels they were targeting weren't things like cruise ships. Although, fun little fact of history, there are some designs out there. I've seen them. Maybe I'll show them later. I don't know. There are some designs out there of cruise ships with stilts built on top to create a landing strip so you can have a jerry-rigged aircraft carrier made out of a cruise ship. Now, I don't think Japan did that. They did some modifications. They would take, like, transport ships, like civilian transport ships, and then modify them to become aircraft carriers. That did happen. Those were smaller aircraft carriers. They weren't very good because they weren't built from the ground up to be, but right, kind of went way off the deep end there. Right. So total war. So they were targeting both military and civilian. So the civilian ships they were targeting, like fishing boats and stuff like that, not a big deal. But oil tankers, massive like iron haulers and stuff like that, like big ships that fueled the Japanese war effort. So the submarine's primary goal in the Pacific front was to go out there and sink as much cargo as possible to starve out Japan. So we were targeting rubber shipments, we were targeting oil shipments, we were targeting iron shipments, we were targeting troop transports, we were targeting food shipments. We were trying to get to the point where Japan just could not afford to continue the war. And so what the USS Barb did, if you see all these flags, these I might be mixed up here, but I am fairly certain that the red flag's civilian, the white flag's military, although, you know what? Don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. I have it a little bit mixed up, but I'm pretty sure this guy will tell us. So, and yeah, there's some interesting things on that flag.
we have to check out their battle flag. With the exception of a couple ribbons up top, every patch on this flag represents a different enemy objective that the USS Barb deleted. For example, each one of these ones represents a different enemy merchant ship, and each one of these represents 7 smaller enemy merchant ships. Look, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that the USS Barb fucked up more enemy infrastructure than Godzilla. Don't take my word for it though, even the enemy's own records indicated that the USS Barb was credited with sinking the most tonnage of their ships. Tonnage! Do you have any idea how bad you have to be getting your ass beat to start keeping track of it by the ton? And
all right. True. But all naval engagements or whatever, whenever you're measuring losses, you don't do it by ship. You don't do it by numbers of ship. Well, you do, but you also do it by tonnage. Because if you sink, let's say, 6 speedboats, but your buddy sinks 1 oil tanker, which one has bigger impact? So that's why they do by tonnage, because that's the easiest way to just ballpark impact on the war effort. So like a destroyer, a battleship, an aircraft carrier, an iron hauler, a oil transport, those are going to be large tonnage ships, huge ships, while torpedo boats, patrol boats, to a degree, minesweepers, those have a lot smaller tonnage, but they also have a lot smaller impact. A lot of those smaller ships are used to defend harbors or to escort other vessels or to do other operations like mine clearing and stuff like that. They're not really built for long range engagements. They're not built for transporting essential goods, because whenever you're moving stuff like that, you want the largest ship available, the largest tonnage, so that one trip of a large tonnage ship will give you the equivalent resources as 10 trips on a smaller tonnage ship. Because when you're in combat, you're at war, you might lose half those ships. So the fewer trips you need to make, the better. So that's kind of why we measure by tonnage. It's a funny joke, I get it. I giggled too, but so that's why.
All this happened before it got out of hand. Cue this man, Eugene Lucky Flucky. He was the commander of the USS Barb in the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th War Patrol. What's important to understand is a commander of a submarine at this point in time was only allowed to serve in a maximum of 4 war patrols, because the Navy believed that any more than that, they would either become too cautious or too reckless. So on the USS Barb's 11th War Patrol, which was also Flucky's 4th and presumably his last war patrol, the USS Barb and her crew, under the command of Lucky Flucky, decided, fuck it, we're just gonna revolutionize warfare for fun. You see, up until this point, submarines really just lied and waited for an enemy boat to sail by, and then they'd sink it with a torpedo. Flucky, though, decided that on his last war patrol, he was going to go out on the offensive. And to do this, Flucky decided that they would utilize a new strategy that he liked to call maximum harassment, which is just a fancy way of saying, hold my periscope, because shit's about to get real. They literally started driving through.
Okay, I let it play for a little bit because I wanted to know if he was going to... It's been a while since I've seen this video. I like this video, but it's rather short, and I have a lot of more information I want to put out on it. So it sounds like he didn't really cover much of Flucky's background or of the other war patrols. So I'm going to take some time and I'm going to talk about that a bit, because he didn't... Yeah, when he said that was before it started getting out of hand, that wasn't entirely accurate. That was before the creativity fully engaged. His last war patrol is absolutely bonkers, don't get me wrong, and his 4th war patrol too, but he right out the gate he started going crazy. So actually he's got a video here. So Captain Flucky did not start on submarines, right? Captain Flucky, he started out on surface ships and doing that whole thing, and then when he served, there it is. Okay, so Foul Electrician's got a video in here somewhere about torpedo boats. Oh, okay. America's Devil Boats, PT boats. Okay, so if you haven't seen that video yet, basically the smallest ship in the battleship game, it's a super dangerous boat. So it's not really capable of like crazy long distance. It doesn't have the range or the full firepower of like a destroyer or cruiser or anything like that. But these boats were very small, very fast, with almost no armor, and just splattered with guns. A ton of like 50 cals, 30 cals, mortars. Some of them had artillery on them. They had torpedoes on them, rockets on them. They took these really fast, slim speedboats with double motors on them, and then they just moved as fast as possible. Because they were so small, they couldn't get hit by torpedoes. Because they were so fast, it wouldn't matter anyway. Torpedoes wouldn't be able to hit them. They'd steer out of the way. Because they were so small and fast, they could dodge a lot of enemy fire. And planes dropping like depth charges and going down and doing gunning and shooting at them and stuff like that, or dropping bombs on them, they'd miss all the time because they're just too quick. Now, they were made of wood, so if they were hit, it was a really big problem, but they were tough to hit, and they were just covered with guns, and the people on those boats were just absolutely bonkers, and they would go raid other vessels and stuff, basically pirates. Very good for harassment and defense of coastlines and stuff like that. Here's another boat. And because it was made of wood, it would not attract sea mines. Magnetic sea mines wouldn't go to that thing. And the depth of it was so shallow that it would go straight over most sea mines, because sea mines don't like float on the surface or a little bit below it. So torpedo boats are very similar, except they're not fully kitted out like that, and they mostly do like defensive harbors and whatnot. So torpedo boats, they have the same mindset. You got to go really fast straight at the enemy, shoot your load, and then dip, because like your whole plan as a torpedo boat is to get there really fast to the enemy ship once you're in range, drop your torpedoes, and then bail and just let the torpedoes do the job. So Captain Lucky Flucky started out his career on one of those boats. So that's where his mindset came from. His mindset was speed, aggression, hit him and bail. And then he served some time on some other surface ships, and he wanted to go back to submarines because he really saw the potential in them. He thought it was really cool, and so he went off and did that. Now, Flucky was a little bit of a genius. He graduated from high school when he was 15. He wanted to go to the Naval Academy and become an officer. One of his neighbors growing up was some sort of Navy vet, and he really looked up to the guy. But he was too young to go to the academy, so he went to some prep school, then the academy, whatever. So he was all about this stuff. He was really smart. And then he went surface boats, then submarines. When he showed up to the submarine, one of the first things he did, because submarines... So he served some time on board an aircraft carrier as a lower ranked officer, and then he kept moving on, whatever. An aircraft carrier, look, I'll just say modern day stuff. Modern day aircraft carrier, about 5,000 people live on board one of those things. Modern day submarine, about 150 people. On a submarine, everybody knows everybody. You know, everybody knows who is good at their job, who is bad at their job, who you can trust, you can't trust, all of that. And the people you can't trust on a submarine that is a really low number. There's one or two dirtbags on every boat, and they usually get kicked out because, you know, if they're a dirtbag in one category, they're going to be a dirtbag in several other categories, so they don't last that long. But yeah, so Flucky went from small surface boats, torpedo boats with crews of like, I don't know, 5 to 10, 10 to 15 people, like real small crews, to bigger surface boats, to an aircraft carrier, down to a submarine, which is real small crew. And modern day submarines, 150, but modern day submarines, nuclear powered, really big submarines. Back World War II, those submarines were tiny. Those crews were 15 to 30 people, no more than that. I actually have something ready for that. So,
through the enemy. And on January
20th. Okay, so I have over here. So the USS Barb was a Gato class submarine, right? Now, I have not seen a Gato class submarine, but a while back I visited a trench type submarine. So this is the USS Torsk. This is parked in the harbor down here in Baltimore. This is also a World War II submarine. It's not the exact type. It's not the Gato class that the USS Barb was, but it's the same era. It's similar enough. So when you're hearing about the submarine and all that, try to picture this. I'll just go through some photos. You got the sail here in the conning tower. Conning tower is all your communication, your periscopes, all of that. And then the sail here, this is where the sail starts, so you know. Whoops. There it is. Okay, so that is the length of the submarine. Now, that looks big, right? To an untrained eye, that looks big. Compared to naval warships, that is tiny. That is absolutely nothing. Like, measuring by tonnage, the tonnage of a submarine is somewhere around like 1 to 5% of the tonnage of a aircraft carrier. I think it's actually about 1 or 2% the tonnage of an aircraft carrier. Like, they are minuscule little things. And this is a World War II submarine, which was a little bit smaller than our modern day ones. At least the length is similar. The length is similar in comparison, but it's the width of it is so much smaller. And that's because these old World War II submarines were built like ships that could submerge. So you have the shape of the ship, right? So the front bow to cut through the waves. You can see there's something different underneath. You got that rounded hull down here. So it's not 100% surface ship-like, but it's still very much a surface boat that was designed similar to a surface boat that could also submerge. Which means when they were underwater, they weren't that fast moving. They were actually faster while traveling on the surface than they were when they were submerged. And that's because when they were underwater, all this stuff on top. Now, I don't think they had these. Okay, no. They didn't have all these safety ropes and guides and all of that up as they dove. But there's still stuff in the way. And this is not aerodynamic, right? Or hydrodynamic, whatever. So when they were underwater, submerged, they were actually, there was more resistance to flow. They were actually slower moving. And that's just the design of it, you know? But a crew like this on this boat, something like 15 or 30 people. Not many people on these small submarines. So Captain Flucky showed up to one of these, and basically the first thing he did was he took the rule book and threw it into the water. Now I wouldn't say he lived to regret that decision, but there was an event we'll talk about a little bit later that he did have to put some rules in place. But that was his attitude going in. It's, hey, everybody knows everybody. We're all in this together. If the boat goes down, we all die. So we are as close to equal as you can get in the military. Well, as close to equal as you can get in the Navy. So punishing people, putting them through captain's mast, all of that seemed unnecessary to him, right? And that really helped endear him to the crew. But more than that, Captain Flucky, he was ready to go to war. He was excited about it. He wanted to go out, he wanted to keep his people safe, and he wanted, I think, in his words, he was a natural-born Jap killer. His words, not mine. You know, old school, a lot of that stuff flew, especially in wartime. But yeah, he was excited to go out there. And his tactics showed. So, at this point, most submarines of the time, they would, so they had a diesel generator. Here, I got some pictures. They had a diesel generator a diesel generator, a battery, and a electric motor. So when you were surfaced, you would run the diesel generator. And back in World War II with these boats, you had to be all the way surfaced. There was no retractable snorkel. There was no system to keep the snorkel unflooded from partly out of the water. So when you surfaced, you full surfaced. And then you ran the diesel generator in order to charge the batteries and run the electric motor, right? So when you're surface, diesel's running, you can move pretty quick because it's shaped like a boat, more or less. But you were very small with very little armor on that submarine. So then you would dive, but when you dove, you had to shut down the diesel generator. You had to run just off of whatever you have left in your battery and use that battery to move the electric motor that turns the prop. So slower underwater, faster on the surface, but an obvious target as you're running diesel generators. You have your little smoke plume coming out. So at that time, World War II, the technique was The submarine captains, they take their boats out at nighttime, or day and nighttime, as they were traveling from the United States to whatever area they were going to. They'd go full speed on the surface, right? Just all the way there. Once they started getting into a spot where there were enemy planes, enemy ships, once they were in a place where they could be spotted and attacked, they would only surface at nighttime, and they dive during the day when they were visible, and they would just stay submerged the whole day. And these old submarines, since they were a lot slower underwater, both because aerodynamic and because they couldn't run their diesels, during the daytime, they were barely moving. They were basically, you travel on the surface at night to get from point A to point B, and then during the day you just sit still. You do nothing. It was a lot of sit and wait, sit and wait. They were basically, the way they described themselves were intelligent sea mines. Because they just waited until something came in. They didn't have to bump into them. They just had to get close, and then they could act. But they weren't out actively hunting. They were ambushing. Now, Lucky Flucky, he didn't like that, right? He started his whole what is the ocean on torpedo boats. And their mode of operation was, if they can't hit us, it doesn't count. And so they just went as fast as possible and fired off torpedoes, which torpedoes are crazy strong, man. Just insanely powerful. Yeah, so when he got on board his first submarine, he's like, I don't like these tactics, but, you know, I'm the captain. There's leeway. There was no, like, strict, thou shalt operate like this. There were instructions and rules and stuff like that, but there was a lot more leeway on how to do things because submarines were so new. And back in the day, we weren't so procedurally handcuffed. Now, there's reasons why we are nowadays, but, you know, still I get to complain about it. So, Captain Flucky showed up, got to his boat, and what he wanted to know is how fast could you do a crash dive? Which is your surface, you got people up in the conning tower. Your surface, you got people up in the conning tower looking around, and then a Japanese plane flies over and spots you. How fast from the word go can you get everybody in the boat, hatches shut, ready for it, and dive? He got it to less than a minute. I want to say 30 seconds, but it's been a while since I read the book. It's been a while since I've seen some of this information, but I want to say it was quick. It was very fast. So it was already fast. On their whole way out there, on their first patrol, they went out there. On their whole way across the ocean, they were surfaced, going full blitz, but then they'd train. They do practice dives all the time. How fast can you get? How fast can you get? Can you shave off a few seconds here? Can you shave off a few seconds there? Because Captain Flucky did not believe in the sit and wait tactic. He believed that a submarine was basically a torpedo boat with the availability to just hide at any given moment. So that's how he treated it. He would go full speed on the surface all the time, hunting for his prey, and just looking for planes, looking for ships. Whatever they saw anything, they dive down real quick. Hang out for a bit, wait for any depth charges to come. If they didn't, great. If they did, wait a little bit longer, then pop back up and go right back out there again. And because of that, he had way more opportunities than any of the captains who would do the sit and wait technique. These the other captains, they had to just hope they were in the right place. Captain Flucky could go to all the places and go out and seek them. So that's why he was so successful, because he started the shenanigans day one. Alright, I think that's enough background.
28th, 1945, they would sail the USS Barb through a shallow minefield into an enemy harbor with...
Oh, God, this is where he picks up. I remember now. Yeah, so this is... I believe this is his fourth war patrol. So, on his first war patrol, before he even got onto his boat, he was talking to the admiral in charge before he, because he was the captain of a ship, so he talked to the admiral who was in charge of the fleet, and he asked the admiral, "Hey, what are your goals for me? What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Well, sink 5 ships. Go sink 5 ships." And keep in mind, at this point, the USS Barb had been on like 5 or 10 war patrols out in the Atlantic Ocean. This is their like third or fourth out in the Pacific Ocean. In all that time, they sank 1 ship. So telling him to sink 5 ships, like, hey, I want you to sink 5 ships, like, that is a tall order. But Flucky just agreed. Went out on that first war patrol, doing those bobbing up and down tactics. The first time they got depth charged, I mean, submarine is essentially a metal dildo under the water, right? Depth charges are just high explosives that planes or ships drop. They go into the water and they just blow up. And because water is not compressible, that shock wave carries for a bit. Now, the ocean's a big place, so it dissipates, but it can do a ton of damage. And when you're in a steel dildo, that sound reverberates and echoes. I mean, it's loud. So the first time they got depth charged, it blew out like most of the light bulbs, was blowing cork out of the insulation, and it sounded like they were blowing up. And then they popped up, they kept going, something spotted them, they dove, they got depth charge again, and Captain Flucky just told the crew, don't worry about the depth charges, don't think about it like that. This is just thunder below. This is just underwater thunder. It's just a storm. That's all it is. We're fine. It's just loud. And so later on, he wrote a book called Thunder Below. So that's where that name came from. But yeah, on the first war patrol, he went out there and he sank exactly 5 ships on his first war patrol, which is very, very impressive. And then he came back. He went out on 2 more war patrols. Now, it's been a while since I read the book, so I can't remember all the details, but it sounds like Fat Electrician over here is going to be going over what happened on his 4th and 5th war patrol. So I want to cover some of the background, like what happened before them, what happened in the first 3. So he's going to start with the harbor incident. I'll just, for pretty's sake, I'll skip over here to the other photos I took. Okay, so on his first war patrol, he sank 5, and then somewhere in his other 2 war patrols, a few other things happened. So he was in a wolf pack with 2 other ships, 2 other submarines, and they were traveling separately but to the same location, and they'd pop up and radio each other every once in a while. Well, they were supposed to meet somewhere, but a few hours before they met there, they could feel and hear depth charges. Now, they were happening very far away, but they knew that somebody was getting attacked, and it was probably a submarine because they were using depth charges. So like, oh, well, we can't get in contact with our 3rd buddy right now. Okay, 3 ships, our 2nd buddy right now. So he's probably busy, probably, pissed somebody off, and now he's getting depth charged. And he was right. That ship did piss somebody off. I think that ship sank 1 or 2 ships. It just happened across a convoy. Targets of opportunity, fired a few torpedoes, then dove and hid, and they started depth charging. That ship actually sank during those depth charges, and Captain Flucky went to school with the captain of that ship. So now it's just the USS Barb and one other ship in the Wolf Pack, and they come across a convoy of Japanese ships, and they line themselves up and they start firing, and they have torpedoes going straight at them. And they dive, so the torpedoes go overhead, and based off the acoustics, those were friendly torpedoes. So they were in such a position that they were kind of firing torpedoes at each other, just with the Japanese Navy in the way. Now, with World War II torpedoes, that's not a big deal. Those torpedoes were not super great, and they were definitely not capable of hitting a submarine that knew it was coming, because they couldn't really change depth, right? They were set at a certain depth, so if there was a submarine and a torpedo went at it, all you had to do was dive a couple hundred feet and it would go straight over you. It was designed to hit the hull of larger ships. But yeah, they did some ambushes, and then that other ship that the USS Barb was with, the last one is Wolfpack, that one also sank. I think it was like the next day. The USS Barb was part of two. It was part of like 4 or 5 Wolfpacks throughout its time with Captain Flucky in charge, and I think 2 of those Wolfpacks, USS Barb was the sole survivor out of the group. Let's see, notable things in the first 3 war patrols. All right, so the USS Barb was going out. It found this. It found a convoy. It fired a whole bunch of torpedoes, sank a bunch of boats, and then it turned around. It moved on, and then somewhere else, another few ships were there, and they got hit Japanese ships. Another Japanese convoy was hit, and they got hit hard. And then, like, a bunch of those ships sank, and they looked like troop transports. Well, an American ship came by a little bit later, kind of like the next day or 2 days later, and they passed nearby, and they saw people in the water. And they thought, oh, well, a bunch of Japanese ships were sunk nearby. These are probably Japanese sailors. So they threw them lines to pull these guys out of the water. And as they were getting them out of the water, these guys looked awful. Like super skinny, starved, covered in oil, crazy sunburns, barely breathing. But they started thanking them in English. It was like, oh shit. So these weren't Japanese soldiers on a troop transport. These were American, British, New Zealand, and mostly Australian POWs. So back World War II, the Japanese did not have high opinions of POWs. They thought that if you surrendered, you sacrifice your honor. And if you have no honor, you aren't a human being. So they would treat them horribly. And whenever they were moving POWs, the reason they kept POWs, why they didn't just execute everybody, one, it would kind of piss off the whole world stage. Like, Japan did have a few allies, and they had to kind of play nice a little bit, so that was a small factor. But also, POWs, that's slave labor right there. So they didn't just execute all of them. They did keep some POWs. They just did not treat them well at all. And as they were moving POWs on troop transports, they did not mark those transports with the Red Cross like all the other countries did when they were moving POWs. So American ships, American planes, American submarines, they could not tell the difference between a Japanese troop transport and a Japanese POW ship. So an American ship sank Japanese ships that were filled with Allied POWs. There were 2 major transports that sank. One of them, the Japanese Navy came up and picked up about half of them. The other half died, and then and this is like just over 1,000 POWs on each ship. And then the other ship, about half of them drowned, and the other half got into lifeboats, and the Japanese Navy came along and fired machine guns into the lifeboats. So, yeah, technically, Americans sank ships carrying Allied POWs. Technically, America killed some Allied POWs, but a little bit bigger picture, that was all Japan's fault, all of it. So, anyway, so that happened, and so there was that. Once they found a few Allied POWs out in the water, call went out to all the American Navy ships in the area, like, hey, if you aren't doing something like right now that's vitally important, there are Allied POWs in the water. Get over there, save as many of them as you can. So the USS Barb was on its way over there to do that. It was the beginning of a typhoon, which the submarines back in those days, because they were a little bit more boat shaped, could handle storms a little bit better. Modern submarines, fuck, storms are fucking awful. They are submarines. If you're in a modern submarine, on the surface during a light breeze, you could feel it. All right, if you are out there in like the precursor to a hurricane, you're just it's so bad. It is so technically it's seaworthy. You will be okay, but it is one of the worst experiences you can have on a submarine is being surface in bad weather. So USS Barb, older submarine, shaped a little bit better for it, but still not fun. Still real bad. But they were going all head flank. All head standard, all head full, all head flank. Those are just different speeds. All head flank means full power. So they were going full power on the surface as a typhoon was starting to try to get there to pull people out of the water. Because if the storm was bad for the submarine on the surface, it would have been horrific for survivors out on the water with just holding on to debris or trying to get into lifeboats or whatever. And they've been out here for like 3 days or something, so they don't have much time left. Most of them are probably already dead. So the USS Barb is on its way over there, and it spots something. There is a Japanese there's a Japanese convoy moving through, and they see the lead ship is a some sort of minesweeper, and then in the middle they see the silhouette of kind of a larger ship, but in front of it is the biggest oil tanker they have ever seen. And it's right in the middle of all the other boats. And they're like, okay, that is it. That is a big target. We want to say POWs, but we are at war here, okay? We can take an hour and try to destroy this shit. And then right before they dove, the dude behind the captain pointed and was like, that's a fucking aircraft carrier. And sure enough, right behind the tanker was an aircraft carrier. That is a golden opportunity. It is rare for an aircraft carrier of that day to escort civilian vessels. An aircraft carrier plus a massive oil hauler. So they were surface, and that lead ship spotted them and started coming at them, and they're like, nah, fuck it, he's not worth our time, don't even think about it. So they were already spotted, and they have a ship moving to intercept, and instead of diving or turning to run away, they go all head flank straight towards the tanker and carrier. And as soon as they get into range, they fired all 6 of their forward torpedoes, and then they turned around, booked it, and dove. And they got depth charge for, like an hour or two before they crawled their way out of there. And they didn't go check to see what happened. I mean, as they were turning around, as they dove, like they dove and then the torpedoes hit. It was a full 2 minutes from firing the torpedoes from the torpedoes hitting their target. They were pretty far away. They were underwater and could feel the shock wave, and it actually pushed the USS Barb around from under the water. That's how they knew they at least hit the oil tanker. That thing must have gone up, but they weren't there to see it. And they weren't there to see the aircraft carrier either. They had no idea if they hit it or not. So they were getting depth charged. They left, and then once they got out of range, once they stopped getting depth charge, once the periscope showed that nobody was around, they surfaced and they went all head flank to go save some POWs. They had no idea what the status of that carrier was. Based off the explosion, they knew the tanker was down, so they just called that a win. Turns out that aircraft carrier did not sink. but it was hit twice by the torpedoes, and it was so badly damaged that it was actively sinking. So they had to go beach it. They had to go ram an island just to keep the thing sort of afloat so that people could get off. And as soon as a large ship is beached and in an active war zone, that's a dead ship. It can't move out of the way of anything. So the aircraft carrier beached itself. They got some of the survivors off. And then American planes came in and just bombed the shit out of it. So technically, USS Barb was not credited with that aircraft carrier sinking, but the USS Barb is why it sank, absolutely. So on the same day that the USS Barb sank an aircraft carrier, they arrived and saved 14 Allied POWs, pulled them all on board, and took them home. I believe that was their second war patrol. Second or third? I believe that was their second war patrol. Alright, I'm sorry. I know this is a fat electrician reaction, but I have 0 viewers, so I can do whatever I want. So, I'm going to jump, and we're going to continue talking about... We're going to continue talking about quality of life on board the submarine and how it worked. And for that, I am just going to talk about it, but I actually have this other video pulled up. Alright, so this is a good one. We are not watching the whole thing. This is 2 hours long, right? This is actually a really great video. Hold on, let me pull up this channel real quick so I can give some credit. Now, I haven't seen anything else from these guys. Whoops. This is the first video I've seen from these guys. But it was really good. So, Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. From what I got from the whole video is that they research a book, or they research a ship, they read books about it, they meet people that were on it, and then they talk about it, and they focus on the Pacific War, and they seem very knowledgeable. There are 2 guys in this video. I don't know who this guy is. I'm sorry, this is weird. So there's 2 guys. There's this dude, and then there is that guy, older gentleman, who is a captain on a modern-day submarine. Now, he says some shit that pisses me off so much, but, and we're going to talk about that, but this is a good video. It's very informative. Basically, so the same way I got most of this knowledge, I did a little bit of other looking things up, and these guys also looked up other things, and they, more importantly, talked to other people who were on board ships like this. So their information's great, but we both read the same book. We both read Thunder Below. It was one of the enginemen, I believe it was, kept a illegal war journal, which in World War II, a lot of the times you were not allowed to keep a journal, because if you were writing down what was happening day by day, and then you got captured and that journal fell into enemy hands, that is a huge problem. But a lot of people broke those rules, including somebody on the Barb. And then after the war, like decades after, that book got out, that war journal, and then Captain Flucky used his own experiences, plus pulled some stuff from this book just to, make sure he got all his dates and his facts right and everything. And then he wrote his own book, Thunder Below, which is really good book, and fact-checked by the American government and the Japanese government, and it is accurate. It is an accurate book. But this guy, right? Okay, so, or not this guy, but the next guy. Here, let's just see what happens.
See what happens here. He's just that kind of a guy,
he was
wasn't he, Bill?
Early advocate of what we now call management by walking around, or MBWA. As was, frankly, was Mush, right? Mush used to walk around and wrestle with his crew members.
So there's different leadership styles. This is in no way isolated to just submarines, right? You got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Boy Scouts, the Costco team members, the 7-Eleven employees, leadership everywhere. It You have the by the books people, prim, proper, whatever, that they care about the rules, regulations, they go by the book. That works in a lot of places, You make your intentions very clear. You very clearly communicate what you want from them and what they can expect from you. And that works. That is a valid form of leadership. That is fine. And then there's the more personable, hey, we're in this together. We can let some things slip, but then we really got to push together. The sort of like work hard, play hard mentality. So that's kind of what he's talking about here. The walk around leadership is when the captain of whatever ship will go out and walk through the spaces and talk to all of these people on his boat and, oh, how's this going? How's this doing? Hey, where are you playing for this? All of that stuff. Now, there are ways to fuck this up, obviously. So, in the prim and proper, here are the rules, here's what I expect of you, here's what you can expect of me. How you mess that up is by being unreasonable or unfair with those rules, like applying them as you see fit instead of what you... So it's like, so you say one thing yet act another way or whatever, or you treat one person by the rules but not another. So that's a way to mess it up. There's just by being overly harsh or overly soft or not being clear in your expectations or not being clear in what they expect to get back from you, and or it being a one-way road. Like, there's lots of ways to mess that up. And then the other way, the walk around leadership, done well, fantastic. But the easiest way to mess it up, which I saw, is when you think that's a great idea. Wow, I want my men to love me or to like me, to be like friendly. I want to walk around the ship and like really get to know everybody and all of this. Except that's not actually who you are. You are actually a by the books person. I just need to do what I gotta do to get a promotion. I don't give a fuck about any of these retards running around keeping me and my boat alive. I just need them to do what they're told and then move on. But I'll go down here and I'll walk and I'll talk to them and all of this because, hey, that looks good. That looks good for promotions if I say that I did this and I learn people's names. And also, I think it's a lot of like lying to yourself, really. Like, you got nothing in common with these people. Like, you went to private high schools and all of that. Then you went out to college. You never, like, your first job was the Navy, and in the Navy you started out as an officer. Like, you can't just go back in the engine room and see a bunch of dirty mechanics covered in oil yelling slurs at each other and expect to get along with them, right? Like, it's different. So the way to mess up the like walk around leadership is to not be genuine, basically. Captain Flucky sounded pretty genuine. It's this guy. I'm getting bad vibes. So this was a captain off of a West Coast fast attack submarine. So he's modern submarine. He was the captain. Just fucking listen to what he says. It's so bad.
No, Gene didn't do that. He kept prim and proper, but he loved the crew. He stretched the rules as it pertained to crew morale, much like Mush did. We sort of walking around in his underwear and wrestling to the ground, but he did other things like, splice the main braces.
Here, actually, I got two examples. So of course, I'm not going to name names or nothing like that, right? But I had two captains, right? So when I first got that there was one, I was qualifying, I was the nub, I was all that shit. By the way, by saying this, I might out myself a little bit. First off, nobody's watching, so it doesn't fucking matter, huh? Alright, second off, if you do recognize me, keep your mouth shut, alright? Don't tell anybody, alright? Alright, so I had two captains, right? The first one, we didn't say this to his face, but his nickname was Captain Dick Smash. This dude was awesome. This guy, he was like 5'2", but he was all about war fighting. He was natural born warrior. He was just, unfortunately, I feel real bad for him. He was born in a time without a war. Okay, sure, we're at war all the time, but without a submarine war. This dude, 5'2", all of it muscle, all of it, and he would walk around. He would go to the torpedo room to work out, and I was talking to the torpedo man and watched about this. Torpedo man would go in, do his logs, walk out, do other logs, do other things, maybe steal some food from the galley, and then walk back like half an hour later. When he left, the captain was doing pull-ups. When he came back, the captain was sweating and doing pull-ups. Like, this dude was a monster. And sure, he probably took a break between, but he watched him, like, sat there and watched him do 50 plus pull-ups without pausing. And that was like before and then after. So it was like, this dude was wild. Of course, he cared about the rules and safety and all of that, but he would also, like, out on mission, he would push the envelope. He was the type of person, it was like, if they, whoops, we got too close to a Russian boat, you got two options, right? Option number one, the very common option, is to pull away from the boat, go back, go up to periscope depth, send out a message, basically self-snitch. Say, hey, we violated the safety bubble, we got too close to this other country's boat that we were following, right? And then, you know, you all sit down, and you have a talk about it, and you're like, lessons learned and all of this. Or you're Captain Dick Smash. You're like, whoops, we got too close. Which, by the way, accidentally getting too close to a ship of another nation, that's super common. Because submarines are designed to not be spotted. They are super stealthy little things, right? So trying to track another submarine that doesn't want you to know that you're there, that's hard on itself, right? But now, imagine trying to track it and follow it, and you lose it, and then you gain it, you lose it, you gain it. And as that's happening, trying to keep the minimum distance, like, between each other, right? Eventually, you're going to be like, oh, we spotted him again, and we're too close. We violated our own personal safety bubble. That's going to happen. So, some people self-snitch. Captain Dick Smash, that came up. Allegedly, that came up, and he's like, well, fuck it, we're already in trouble anyway, may as well send something good home while we're at it. And then they got closer, went underneath this other boat without them spotting it, and used the periscope while underwater to take pictures of the boat as they were going along. So that way, when they pulled back and they radioed home and they're like, hey, we fucked up, we got too close, but now look at all this intel you get for free. It really... The talk of the town is not how you messed up. That is not the focus. The focus is, look at all of this juicy intel that you got for us. And they kind of forget that you violated that safety margin. That was Captain Dick Smash. Captain Dick Smash was awesome. He was all about war fighting. He pushed the boat. Like, he pushed you hard. You had to work hard. But by God, satisfying work. Next captain comes in, dude's a fucking pussy. Awful. And he would do the walk around, and I hate to say this dude loved Thunder Below, and he also loved the story of the Barb. But the problem with him is that he idealized it, but he never lived it. He was too cowardly for it. He liked to talk the talk, but he wouldn't walk the walk, right? So he had everybody who got awarded a fish on that boat, he'd sign he'd have you sign your name into his copy of Thunder Below, which is cool, don't get me wrong. And he'd do some other things based off that, but mostly he was so scared of getting in trouble by any sort of higher ups that he would not have the flexibility to do any of the cool stuff. Alright, sorry, that was a wild tangent. Alright, let's get back at... Yeah, and so this guy kind of comes off a little bit like that to me. but the worst is yet to come. Right now, it's not bad. Right now, it's not bad.
Navy expression for drinking. So he would have alcohol on board, and he would give the crew a reward.
Oh my god, I didn't even talk about drinking on the USS Barb. Okay, yeah, so when they went out, he decided that, so Captain Flucky, when they went out, he's like, okay, we're gonna work hard, we're gonna play hard, right? The work hard. We're gonna go fast on the surface, we're going to do crash dives all the time. That is dangerous stuff. That is high risk, you know? So if you're doing high risk, you want high reward too, right? First off, high reward is accomplishing crazy stuff, like sinking aircraft carriers, like sinking 5 ships in a single war patrol. Like, that is satisfying on its own, don't get me wrong. But that was very mission-oriented, this is your job, sort of like, high reward. He wanted a more, like, tangible. So, his deal was, hey, we're going to go out here. Every time we successfully sink a ship, I'm going to reward the crew with battle shots, or depth charge rations, essentially. So they went out. The first time they sank a ship, they sank it. They went out. That night, he talked to the doc on board. I was like, we do have alcohol on board, right? It's like, yeah, we have a bottle. So they had a bottle of military issued cheapest whiskey you can find. And that whiskey was labeled under the Navy supply system as depth charge rations. And that was if your ship was super damaged and you were probably going to die, everybody could get a shot of cheap whiskey before they went. Or just to calm the nerves if your ship is in some serious trouble and there's nothing you can do. That is so fucking depressing. In the modern Navy, we kind of have an equivalent. On submarines, some people still carry cigarettes. You can no longer smoke cigarettes on a submarine, but some people would bring a pack with them anyway, so that if worst case scenario, the ship's going down, there's no recovering it, you just light up a cigarette. Fuck it, it's your last one. So we kind of have our equivalent nowadays. But right, back to the story. So after they sank the ship, they celebrated. Everybody got poured a shot, and they were drinking their depth charge rations. This bottle of whiskey that under any other war patrol, any other captain would never be opened. That was the same bottle that was placed, like that bottle came with the ship. It had never been opened before. So Captain Flucky, though, he's like, hey, we're doing some crazy shit. I'm willing to bend some rules, to relax some rules and stuff like that. I'm the fucking captain. I'm in charge. We're going to have some battle shots. Congratulations. You guys deserve it. So that was nice. And they actually, after they came back from that patrol, they had killed the bottle. And ordering a replacement to their depth charge rations was pretty entertaining. Because that's not supposed to be something, like, if you're drinking that, the boat's not going back to port. Like, you may survive, as in you may escape the ship before it sinks, but that's not something you pull back into port missing. And yeah, so they had battle shots at celebration, but they also had a cake. And he talked to the chef about it. He's like, hey, so I want to do something special for the crew. Every time we sink a boat, can you bake a cake, like, in celebration? He's like, oh, of course I can do that. Of course. His crew fucking loved him because he was a good guy, and he went out. He did the walk around leadership style where he knew everybody and all of that, and he was so focused on the mission, and he was mission oriented, like, relatable guy, which for a submarine, even modern day, that's talking about Captain Dick's match, so even modern day, that's still a super solid method of motivation and of leadership. So this guy, this chef, he baked a cake, and he's like, all right, so what was the mission? What did we do up there? It's like, okay, so we sank this ship, we were in this position, and then he used the frosting and he decorated the cake. Now, super sweet gesture, don't get me wrong, But this chef, he got out of high school. I think his only work experience was on a farm. He was not a real chef. He was a Navy chef. He learned how to cook in the Navy. So his cake was kind of shit, and his artwork was not good. But it's the thought that counts, and everybody enjoyed it. Now, in later War Patrol, so in his first War Patrol, it was some shitty cakes and some depth charge rations. And they ran out of depth charge rations. And also, that whiskey was really awful. So a lot of people didn't like it. And, I mean, it's still whiskey, so even if they didn't like it, most still drank it. But a few abstained, just because it was so bad. And the cakes, everybody ate the cake. But the chef was not good. And this one time, he fucked it up so bad that one of the crew members, he got a slice of cake. He's like, what the fuck? And he turned to the chef. He's like, what is this? It's like, what do you mean? And he took it with both hands. He cracked it open like a like one of those thick wafer crackers. And the chef was so embarrassed about the whole thing. But then they pulled in, and Captain Lucky Flucky did a couple things. First, he got a replacement for the depth charge rations, and then he kept the Navy issued depth charge rations in his room. You know, he kept them on shore because he did not want to put that swill back into the boat. So instead he went out and he bought a bottle of pretty decent whiskey. 2 bottles, in fact, because they wanted to sink more ships, and they had already run out of their initial rations, so he needed more bottles. So he did that, and he talked to some of the crew, and they said, it's like, yeah, honestly, some of us don't even like whiskey. We just kind of drink it because it's there, you know, but it's not enjoyable. So he also went out and he got crates of beer, and which is not something you see happen very often. And he took these crates. He got some guys from the boat. They took these crates of beer down into the sub, which, by the way, because Captain Flucky did that, there is an official rule for the submarine force. If you are underway for 90 days or more, you are authorized 1 beer day, which is you can crack open a cooler and everybody on the boat gets 1 beer. I like where it comes from. It's a nice touch, it's a nice thought, but 90 days underwater kind of fucking sucks. And a single beer out of all of that is not at all worth it. Especially since a lot of us were brewing our own in the outboards and all that. So 1 beer wasn't very special anyway. Still though, I have a soft spot for Miller Lite because of that. That was the first time I ever drank one. But whatever. Back to the point. So they took the beer on board, and this is disgusting. I even think this is nasty. They didn't have anywhere to put the beer, but then they realized that the showers could fit it, right? So they put a couple crates of beer into the showers. And even on new submarines, on modern day submarines, water rationing is real, right? Like a Navy shower or a submarine shower is you get into the shower, you know, naked and all of that. You turn on the water for about 20 or 30 seconds, get yourself all wet, then you turn it off, then you soap yourself up, and then you turn on the water for another 30 seconds to get the soap off, then you turn it on. 1 minute of water usage, that's all you get, because you can make your own water when you're underway. We have distillation plants and all of that, but they are very slow, because distilling seawater is a tough thing to do. And on a submarine where space is limited, your distillation units, they're not small, but you need big distillation units to make a large quantity of fresh water, and that's just not something you can have on a submarine. And water on a submarine, you have drinking water, you have cleaning water, you know, that's your potable water. But you have an entire steam plant running in order to get your energy, to move the prop, to get your electric power. A lot of water goes towards that. So yeah, water rationing is still a thing. And back in the day, World War II, even more so, a lot more water rationing. Like, so you already weren't showering every day, and when you did shower, you weren't using much water. So they would so Camp Flucky put these crates of beer into the shower, and that would serve as extra motivation. I mean, like, these guys already wanted to sink ships, right? Because that's what they were there for. And Captain Flucky was super pumped about it, and him being super pumped would make the people around him super pumped. And it's just a cascading effect, right? Really good stuff there. But what's a little bit more motivation, right? Like, I want to sink ships, so because that's what I'm here for. Plus I get cake. Plus I get a beer out of it. And once we drink enough of the beer, the showers become open and I can shower again. So it's just more and more motivation. And that's pretty gross, and I would have not have gone that far, but different time, different era, active war zone. I get it. All right, yeah, that's enough of that.
Quart of alcohol after a successful attack, for example. Let me tell you, that's not conventional, and that was not common. But he was willing to ignore rules as it pertained to improving crew morale. He figured they're risking their lives, they're giving up their life, happy life, and I'm going to try to give them as much as I can in return for that.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about.
All right, yeah. So that's essentially what I was saying, but a few less words. Now we're going to skip real quick the part that actually made me angry, and then we'll move on.
He knew their family status, their traits, their quirks. He quickly learned who he could rely on, which, as he found out, was all of them, which is incredible.
Right.
When I was CO, I used artificial methods like very intense training periods where I would cause the crew to go without sleep for long periods of time. And people get agitated by that. We're just training. Why won't you let me sleep? Well, the reason I didn't let them sleep was because you really learn who you can rely on and who would fall.
Okay. Yep. So this is what, God, just rehearing that pissed me off. All right. So what this motherfucker does not understand is that there is a difference between the rates on a submarine. There is a difference between the jobs, okay? So you got, okay, this isn't even about the USS Barb anymore, but it's about this channel, it's about this video. I want to talk about it. This guy pissed me off with this statement. All right. This guy is a captain, right? He is the captain of a submarine. He is an officer. Now, when you are early in your career as an officer, you come in as an ensign, as a lieutenant, junior grade, whatever. You go aft first. You go to the engine room. You work with the nukes. You become qualified there first, and then you go forward. And then when you're forward, you work in control. You work with the sonar techs. You work with not really the torpedo men, the fire control techs. You work with the pilot and co-pilot. You work with the steering, the navigation, all of that, right? But you start your career in the engine room. You learn about nuclear power, you learn about the steam plant, then you go forward. Now the problem is, so the good news, so what's good about that is that the officers, as they're learning and all of that, they learn all parts of the boat. So that way, when you're forward and you're in charge of steering the boat and deciding where it goes and stuff, you understand what the engine room is capable of, what limitations they have, and what they can give you. And you know how to communicate with them and all that. So that's great stuff right there, right? The problem is that seems almost temporary, right? Like, it seems after enough time, and this guy, I think he said it, he was in for 25 years, like 25 or 30 years. So in his first, 5-6 years, maybe he spent some time in the engine room. And then after that, it sounds like he spent it all forward. And there is a serious difference in the quality of life and the working hours, all right? He must have forgotten what it's like in the engine room. Because the way he's saying it, I made the crew sleep deprived. I made the crew do all this work and stuff like that, wouldn't let them sleep. He's talking about the whole crew, right? The whole crew. As like the whole crew had similar experiences before that point, or at least, comparable, right? Control, where the captain steers the boat and all that shit. Control has the sonar techs, the fire control, the navs up there. All those people, all those forward rates, they sit down in their chair, they do 8 hours shift, they do an 8 hour shift, and then they go eat, and then they go sleep for like 16 hours. Slight exaggeration, alright? But even the nubs, even the unqualifieds, sleep for like 8 to 10 hours a night. Probably more. The fully qualified guys, I knew a lot of them who would literally work their 8 hours, give 20 minutes for relief at some point later on, and then all that other time was spent sleeping or playing video games. Alright? That's what the forward compartment is like. So having those guys stay awake and be sleep deprived and get angry so that they can bond with their other guys, right? That's fair. That is a fair assessment. Now, the problem, I can't believe he's not seeing this. The problem is that they bond with each other against you because they know you caused this. They know it's your fucking fault. So the crew does tend to bond and do better and all that, the forward crew, but they don't like you very much. So it's a double-edged sword. Maybe that's what you want, but they're less likely to respect you. They're more likely to get irritated and angry and pissed off with the boat. Their motivation's going to drop. Their morale is going to drop. That's the forward compartment. The aft compartment, when you're a nub, you are unqualified. You are sleeping 4 to 6 hours, right? You have 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night. You get 8 hours, 8 hours watch, 4 hours training, 4 hours trying to qualify, 2 hours of maintenance, and then, whatever else happens. I was at a point where I was getting between 3 and 4 hours of sleep every night for months. I was beginning to hallucinate. I was not the only one in that position, but the only other people in that position were engineering, not forward guys. This fuck, I hate how he said that, how he put his guys through that, because engineering is already not sleeping. A lot of those guys are not sleeping well. They're already sleep deprived. You think you're punishing the whole boat. Imagine your 4-hour block of sleep getting interrupted. God, I hate this dude. He just... Alright. I'm gonna chill out a little bit. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to show from this bit. So the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. The information in here is really good, okay? It's 2 hours. It's way more concise than what I'm telling you. They have a lot of information. It's pretty entertaining. It's good stuff. But just keep in mind that this is higher up officers. This is their perspective of things. And that perspective, it gives you a different story, right? That gives you the officer story, the higher up story, how they see these events. I'm, I guess, in a way, giving you the other perspective, all right? All right. It is good. Recommend it. Just know what you're getting into. Okay, I'm sorry. I was about to get back into it. I'm serious, but I just remembered I'm not yet done with quality of life yet. Alright, so this is what the inside of... Again, this is what the Trench class, this is not the Cato class, but this is what submarine at the time looked like. This is, I believe, this is the aft torpedo room. So you got the 4 torpedoes here. In the forward compartment, the front of the ship, you had 6 torpedo tubes, but it looked similar. I want to show you the beds. Yeah, some controls, the diesel again. I forgot what pictures I took. Okay, so this is a picture of the inside of a World War II submarine. You can go out there and take a picture of a modern day active duty submarine, and they would they would look the exact same. All of this equipment is still being used. The Navy believes in if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of a deal. And broke by them means, no longer suitable, no longer good enough to whatever. So, of course, improvements happen everywhere, right? Like, modern day submarines are way better than World War II submarines, okay? Not saying they aren't. But this is a very simple, very effective system. And because of how simple it is, that means it's really, really reliable. All right? Like, and when you're worried about getting depth charged and all of that, when that's what you have to build the submarine to withstand, reliability is key. So stuff like this could survive depth charges, this could survive fires, this could survive flooding. This whole thing could be submerged in water and would still work. So it looks weird seeing this on a modern submarine, but it does make sense. This right here, this is a little lever going into the side, lever arm. It's a crank. You crank that, that's called the growler. What that does is that sends an electric signal through the phone line to, this is supposed to have this little dial on it, so you could select which phone to call. So that's called the growler. You turn it, and it sends a signal through the line to whichever one's selected, and it growls at you. This is a speaker right there. It sends that signal through that speaker, and it sounds like this weird mechanical dog growling. It's very loud. This is not hooked up to any power supply. I mean, I think this is, but that's something else. But the phone itself and the crank and all of that, there's no power supply. So you can have a total loss of power, and the phones would still work. That's why these are still being used. And this phone right here, so you growl them so that they know that there's somebody who wants to talk to you, and you pick up the phone. And this phone, super simple. You select which room you want to talk to, or sorry, that's not right. That's just the growler. This right here, 2 different circuits. There are 2 different phone circuits, one for aft, and then one for the whole ship, right? So you plug this phone into, and this phone is plugged into, I think, both of them by default, so whole ship. But you can also unscrew these and put on a headphone version of this to listen in. And then you're what's known as a phone talker, which is an actual role for like emergency situations. But yeah, so you pick up this phone, there's this button on it. And when you depress a button, that closes the circuit. So now it's aligned with the other side. And there's this little crystal inside both the speaking and the hearing piece, which means that these are interchangeable. You can flip it upside down and it would still work just fine. There's these little crystals that as you speak into them, the sound waves, the compression, translates it into electricity, goes through the line to the other side, and then comes out as sound through their crystal. Really neat system. That's how it's so reliable. No moving part, well, except the wire. No moving parts. No power required. Very durable, so it's still being used. Yeah, sorry. The bathroom, it looks way too familiar. This is very close to what we're still using. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, so living spaces have gotten better. So this World War II submarine right here, this is not the same class of boat as the USS Barb, but is of the same era, so it's going to be very similar. So these berthing spaces, you have your main P-way going all the way through the boat, and you got your bunks on either end, right? So you have to walk through the bunk room in order to get to the rest of the ship. Modern day submarines are a little bit better. They have these hideaway areas, right? So there aren't just racks in the middle of the P-way, they're kind of tucked away a little bit, and they're only stacked 3 high instead of 4. So it is a little bit better. All these old boats, I mean, that's all you get. You have some lockers in the outboard to put your stuff, but you do not have much room. Modern day submarines, about the thickness of that mattress, you have a compartment, like the rack that your bed is on, is also a drawer, and then the mattress sits on top of that. So that's why they can only fit 3 high instead of 4 high. Because you have a little bit more space, and that feels luxurious. Like it looks very cramped. You get used to it. This space is not bad. That's really all you need to live on a sub for, a few months. Or plus the extra storage space. Don't you need that extra storage space? But storage space plus this, that's enough. Until you bring in hot racking, which on these old boats, hot racking was standard. A lot of people did it on new boats. If you are on a ballistic missile submarine or a guided missile submarine, you don't have to hot rack, but those are big boats, like really fucking big boats. So they're a lot more spacious. It's still a submarine, but they are more spacious. So you don't have to hot rack on those. Fast attacks, I was on fast attack. When you're new, when you're unqualified, you have to hot rack. And even some of the qualified people have to hot rack. Sometimes it gets bad enough where almost everybody's hot racking. And hot racking, so you have 2 bunks with 3 people assigned to them. So, yeah. So you're either one person is going to have a bunk to themselves, which if you have 2 nubs and a senior guy's going to get a rack to himself. And the 2 nubs are just going to split that rack. And how you pull it off is you have your own sheets, and you just swap out the sheets whenever. But that means if 2 people are already in the rack, you're awake. There's no way around that. So they try to get it, the 3 people hot racking, they try to get them so that all 3 people are on different shifts. That way you always have the opportunity to sleep 8 hours at least once a day. Doesn't always work out that way, but, it's the goal. But yeah, so every time, that whole time we're talking about the USS Barb, this is kind of what you can expect from the living conditions in here. And people are hot racking. But there are ways to stop hot racking. I really wish I took a picture of it. I visited this boat like over a year ago. I wasn't even making videos at the time. These pictures were just for me. But, and so torpedoes, these are torpedoes in the tube. But there are torpedo racks, which are, your spares. So after you fire torpedoes, you send the next torpedo in from the rack into the tube with, hydraulics and rigging gear and all of that. So it's about that same length. Imagine a torpedo tube cut in half and not solid, like rails and stuff like that, but still in a semicircle shape. But as long as a torpedo. And that's a torpedo rack. The torpedo sits on that rack. Now, once you load those torpedoes, and once you fire a torpedo, you can load another torpedo off the rack into the tube, and now you have a empty torpedo rack. Well, on a submarine, you don't want to waste space, so now you're underway and you have an empty rack. You can take one of those mattresses. On modern boats, we also have plywood to lay across them. You could take one of these mattresses, lay it across the torpedo rack, and now you sleep in the torpedo bed. The torpedo racks are the most luxurious places to sleep in the entire boat. They are so nice. You get so much headroom. You get so much leg room. It's all to yourself. It's in the torpedo room, which is nice and quiet. It's low in the boat. Oh, it is wonderful. And so that was also more motivation for them. So these guys, God, it just stacks and stacks and stacks. So these guys go out on war patrol. They sink a ship. What does that mean? That means that everybody gets some, either a shot or beer. They get cake. They completed their objective. They sank something. They're rearing to go. Beer gets moved out of the shower. Now they can shower. And a torpedo is now fired, so a rack is open. So one less person has to hot rack. So you have 3 people hot racking. One bed opens up. The quality of life for 3 people just skyrocketed. Tons of motivation. Tons of motivation to go sink shit. Oh, we are not even done with the cook story yet. Here. Alright, here's a nice picture to enjoy. By the way, this is... I keep having to remind myself. This is a World War II submarine. This kitchen, you can't see it from here. That oven is the same brand. It's the same... It is the exact same fucking model oven that we use, that we still use. This fucking mixer right here, same exact one, down to the scratched up paint. If it ain't broke. Right, so the chef. So after their first war patrol, and they got that burnt cake, people gave the chef grief about it, and the chef tried, right? He wasn't fucking up on purpose. He really was giving it his full effort, and people understood that, and he stayed up long hours trying to make these cakes, but they still gave him shit for it, because of course you would. And so these guys, when they got into port, and they went, they relaxed, they drank, they did whatever, they also wrote home. And a lot of these guys, they wrote letters home, and then they asked, hey, in return, can you send me? Yeah. So before they go underway again, all these guys are giving the chef all these letters, and they wrote home saying, hey, life is great, we're totally fine, we definitely don't see combat, I'm totally safe, don't worry about it, but our chef is not good at making cakes. Can you send your cake recipe home? Can you send your cake recipe to me? And so then they'd get all these like home cooked style cake recipes, and they'd give it to the chef, and the chef would make sure you had the ingredients you needed, and then they went underway again. And then instead of making the same as like the only cake he knew how to bake, the Navy style, however they taught him, he would try all these recipes from different people's like family traditional cakes and these like secret ingredient cakes or whatever. And he was trying all these different styles and stuff, and he was still not a good cook. But he tried, he really tried, and he made some different styles, and it was interesting. His shitty little like MS Paint style frosting artwork of what happened after each battle. And it got to the point, I think it was after the 3rd war patrol, before the 4th, I think that's when it happened, that so everybody stayed on the boat. They were loving when Captain Flucky was in charge, but the chef went up to Captain Flucky after they pulled in and officially requested to leave the boat to go somewhere else. And Captain Flucky, he was like, all right, I'm not going to stop you, I'll prove this if you want, but why? I thought you enjoyed what we did. I thought you enjoyed the crew. I thought you were okay with all of this. He's like, oh, no, I am. I love this crew. I love what we do. You guys deserve better, though. I am a bad cook. I can't. You guys deserve a much better cook that can bake the cakes right and all of that. And Captain Flucky took him aside and was like, look, you're not a good cook, but you are giving people a taste from home. They are giving you their recipes that they grew up with for special occasions, and you are giving them a taste of that when you're underway. you're not a good cook, but you are excellent for improving morale. Like, you are the best. I want to keep you here. I won't stop you from leaving, but I want you to stay. And so the chef stayed. A nice feel-good story. Okay, I think that's about it, and we can move on. Yeah, this we have flat screens now. Not much else has changed. Of course, the technology and like what it's capable of, it's fucking leagues better. But it's just funny to see some of this stuff. This looks like main battle tank blows. For the main battle tanks are on the outside of the pressurized hull. So in a submarine, you have two different hulls. You have the internal hull, which is, or the pressurized hull. When you're inside the boat, you touch the bulkhead, you touch the curved wall. That's the pressurized hull. And then you have the outer hull, which is outside of that. But what's important is, in between those two hulls, you have like your torpedo tubes go through those, your shaft seal and the shaft goes through that, and you got and you have ballast tanks in there, and those ballast tanks are just giant tanks. When you're surfaced, they're full of air, and you have these covers on them. That way the boat stays afloat all the time, right? It is buoyant like that. But when you go to dive, you fill those ballast tanks up with water, and now you are controlling your buoyancy through much, much smaller internal tanks. And those aft and trim tanks control your buoyancy much, much more delicately, so that you can control your depth and all of that through things like steering and rudders and all of that. Now, these, honest to God, I don't know if World War II submarines had this option. It looks like the same actuators, but emergency main battle tank below is in a worst case scenario. You lost propulsion, you are going down, you need to surface. You use these actuators to shut the covers on the main battle tank vents, and then force high pressure air into those tanks to blow all the water out. So now you're underwater, you're going down, and then all of a sudden you're a balloon. Like all the tanks are out of water, you're just filled with air now, and you shoot up to the surface. Uncontrolled ascension, which can be really fucking dangerous, which is why it's only a worst case scenario that you use them. I guess I think this is forward torpedo tubes. I don't know, it's been a while since I went on this boat. Yep, and that's the, this looks all exactly the same. These are just the hatches. So you have an outer hatch and an inner hatch. That's about that. That has not changed. Okay, I guess that's it. That's it about. I think that's it about quality of life and comparing the submarine. So now you got the visuals. Let's see. So they saved the POWs. They took down an aircraft carrier. They took a prisoner of war. So Fat Electrician does not talk about this one either, which is a bit of a shame. But so they took out a whole bunch of ships, Japanese ships, and they went in. They did not take down military. It was civilian ships like transport. And they went in and they decided to take a prisoner, but only one. Because since they sank these ships, but it took a little bit of time to go down, they knew that the Japanese had time to send out a distress call or whatever, so somebody was coming to pick them up. But the USS Barb came along right up next to one of the lifeboats and was like, hey, we'll take one volunteer. One person. Who wants to become a POW? The rest of you can sit in the boat and hope somebody shows up. And one of the Japanese crew members volunteered. And they took him on board, and they interrogated him very gently. They gave him some water, they gave him some food, they asked him some questions. They pulled out their 1911, they asked the same questions again. This guy, I can't remember his name. Oh, you know what? There are pictures. I am willing to bet. Alright, that's not it. I don't think it's gonna show up. Oh. This looks right. Is that looks like Flucky right there. That is. Okay. God, awful. Okay. Well, yeah, all smiles. So they pulled this guy out. They did some light interrogation, and then as soon as the gun was presented, not even pointed at him or nothing, you know, it's kind of a dick move. I get it, but you know, wartime, World War II time. He started answering all these questions on where the shipping lanes were, where the minefields were, and all that. But they still had a few months to go in their war patrol. They were still out there for a while, and now they had a Japanese POW, so they didn't really know what to do with him. So, at first they just had him doing small things, like cleaning up here and there, and the dude was getting bored, and he was... that they had this like tour guides version of English to Japanese. So this little translation book that wasn't very good. So he spent some time trying to like learn how to speak English just a little bit, and they used a lot of that book back and forth with long talks. But he learned how to clean. He helped the chef do a little bit of cooking. And he kept, like, it took, after a week or two, he's like, I want to help more. And eventually he spilled his guts on why. So this guy, he was just a civilian, just some random dude, and he got drafted in. But he got drafted into the Japanese Navy's, like, supply corps or something like that. So he was a crewmate on like oil rig or like oil transports and like coal transports and stuff like that. Like he was on those civilian boats, but he was kind of drafted. And he didn't much care for the war. He didn't really care one way or the other. You know, he loved his country and all of that, but then him and his boat went out to deliver goods and whatnot to Nanking. And apparently, from this guy's testimony, when he came back to his boat, like he went out to help move some stuff or whatever, and then he came back to his boat, before the guards would let him in, there were these two Japanese guards at the gate, and they had taken a Chinese woman, and the most he would say is that they were bored and they thought it was funny to watch him squirm, and they wouldn't let him back onto the boat until he did something to that Chinese woman. And if you know anything about Nanking, you can draw conclusions. And after that, he was pretty disillusioned, and he did not think Japan was fighting the good fight. So that's why he volunteered to be a POW, and that's why after very little in the way of questioning, he just started giving up all of this information. And then after that, he started helping loading torpedoes in the torpedo room. He became part of the crew, and he was helping to put torpedoes into the tubes that would be fired at Japanese ships. After they finished that war patrol, and and they pulled in. This guy went to a POW camp, and they kept writing him letters. It was weird situation. I think that catches us all up. Okay, I'm streaming for about 2 hours. And we are almost 2 minutes into the video. Alright, second. Alright.
Through a shallow minefield into an enemy harbor with 30 enemy
Oh god, yeah, he's talking about the big thing.
maximum harassment.
Oh no. I'm sorry, there's so much I missed.
For patrol, he was going to go out on the offensive. And to do this, Flucky decided that they would utilize a new strategy that he liked to call maximum harassment.
Okay, Fat Electrician's mixing up a couple things here. I'm pretty sure he read the same book I did, and he's just pulling like his favorite bits from it and all that, which is great, you know, it's fine. But the maximum harassment, that was actually his 5th war patrol. His 4th war... At this point, all the captains are supposed to have 4 war patrols. His 5th one was special. You know what? We'll talk about that later. Maximum harassment did not come into play, not really, until the 5th. So we'll talk about that one a little bit later.
Which is just a fancy way of saying, hold my periscope, because shit's about to get real. They literally started driving through the enemy. And on January 28th,
That did happen. They used up all their torpedoes, all of their 5-inch shells, all of their 4-inch shells. All they had left was small arms. And they had to damage the ship with the last of their ammo, so they decided, fuck it. Like, just hit the thing.
1945, they would sail the USS Barb through a shallow minefield into an enemy harbor with 30 enemy ships in it, firing a total of 8 torpedoes at the enemy ship.
Okay, so he's just glancing over all the prep work for it. This is finding this thing was game changing. Okay, so they had up along the coast, right? So there was supplies going back and forth from China to Japan, right? That was a major part of the Japanese war effort. They needed to keep those lines open. So the American Navy, especially the submarines, were out there to stop that, to sink those ships, to starve Japan out. So the Japanese Navy was doing everything they could to keep those cargo ships out of harm's way, and it really worked. So there were Americans on the coast, hidden on the coast, who would spot these convoys moving back and forth, and they'd call them in. And then the high command would call down to the submarines and say, hey, these ships were spotted here. Submarines would go out there, no ships. So Flucky, he had a theory. He was thinking, okay, so they know that they're spotted along the coast. I bet that, okay, so of course they know that most submarines hunt at night and don't do much during the day. They just sit there, right? So they must feel fairly safe during the day from submarines, but scared at night. I bet they're docking somewhere at night. So he went along, and he went at nighttime. He would go along to all the ports and see if he could find any Japanese military ships, and he couldn't find any. So it was like, all right, so they have to be waiting somewhere in here. So he pulled up all these old records and all this stuff, and he found out that there was I think it was a 6-mile stretch of water. No, that wasn't it. Well, it was a stretch of water. It's a few miles of water that went out to a port, but it was a shallow water port. And I mean shallow water, 6 feet deep. That's not enough for a submarine to go through surface. And submarines are little guys, right? That's enough for some trawlers, some other small ships like that. Which, by the way, this ship, you can see how small it is compared to the submarine. This still counts as a kill. So, a lot of those ship sinkings that the Barb got, yeah, they were real small. But they did sink big shit too. They got their tonnage. That's why measuring in tonnage is important. But yeah, they did both. They sank a lot, and they sank a lot of big things. Right, anyway, so it was a shallow water port, so nothing useful could get in there. But he was suspecting, like, what if they dredged it out? You know, what if they took a dredger in there and dug out the bottom so that they could move their warships in there? If they did that, we wouldn't know about it. It's like, if we didn't know they dredged it, then we wouldn't know to look there. And he was looking at where the ships were going and all of that, and then where they were losing contact the most, and he actually found the secret harbor. He went in there, and then, yeah, it was this. It was, yeah. So it was a really big deal. No outside intel gave it to him. They just figured it out.
Barb threw a shallow minefield into an enemy harbor with 30 enemy ships in it, firing a total of 8 torpedoes at the enemy.
Yeah, so 30 ships. They have, what was it? 6 torpedoes in the front tubes, 4 torpedoes in the rear tubes. 30 ships. They have a total of 10 that they can fire before they have to start using rigging equipment and reloading those torpedo tubes, which takes time. 30 ships, 10 torpedoes. The issue is, which targets do you pick? They literally, when they fired it, they just fanned out. Their goal was to hit each ship no more than once. 1 torpedo per ship, because they wanted to damage as many as possible. And if they sunk, that was a bonus. They hit a lot. I can't remember. I think they sank 6 of them, or sank 4 of them, and heavily damaged 6 others. So it was a huge deal that they did that. And when the ships they hit was a munitions ship, so it was carrying all the ammo, and when they hit it, it just went off, and it was firing munitions into other ships around it. Like, ammo was just cooking off. It was a disaster. And one ship was coming at them, and then they turned around and they fired 2 torpedoes aft at it.
Enemy ships, he would break the record for the most enemy tonnage sunk in a day. They would then turn around and escape completely unharmed. This was considered to be the...
Okay, so he's just done with that story. Yeah, so, I'm sorry, I mixed up my stories a bit there. The 2 torpedoes they fired aft, I don't think they fired it at the ship that was chasing him, or if they did, they missed. So when they were going in, they found the secret dredged up area. They found the secret passage. They found the secret harbor. And they radioed in to their buddy in their wolf pack, because they had one surviving guy in their wolf pack at that point who would later be lost at sea. So they called him, and they're like, hey, we just found this harbor. This is what the conditions are like. This is what it is. Are you in with us? And the other dude radioed back. He's like, fuck that. No. Like, that is a death sentence. So he talked to his crew. He's like, hey, if we're doing this solo. Are you in? And everybody was in. So when they went out there, before they went out there, they... God, how do I describe this? All right. I'm going to get artsy for a second. There we go. Okay. Okay, this is gonna be real bad. All right, don't judge me too harshly. All right, so when they were going out there, they knew it was gonna be super dangerous, and they knew that, and they couldn't dive. It was dredged up, so big ships can go through it, but it still wasn't deep enough for a submarine to dive. That has to be pretty deep water. So they would have to go in at night, fire their torpedoes, turn around, fire their aft torpedoes, and bail, and stay on the surface. Which a submarine is faster when it's surfaced, but it's still slower than other boats. And they got no armor, or barely any. So the plan was to do that, and then to book it as fast as possible, going 150% of the diesel capacity or the diesel rating, right? So, and or the designed limit, the design limit, 150% of the diesel design limit, and that limit is just a safety limit, right? You can exceed it, and you'll be okay, maybe. But at that point, you're risking things breaking. And how that limit is set is you have a governor, right? So you have your main shaft, right? Nice super artsy little thing. This is your engine. Using a mouse. Oh my god, this is so bad. All right, and then you have. I'm not spelling it. You have your prop, right? Why did I do that? All right, you have your prop, and then here, you have this little gear thing, right? Which is hooked up to another gear, which has a shaft on top of it. All right, now this shaft here, this is an important bit. All right, this is what this looks like. All right. So you have on this shaft, you have these two arms with balls on them. What I'm doing right now is I am drawing a governor. A governor is just an automatic system which governs the speed. And then in between them, you have a spring. Right? So, as this shaft spins, it spins this. So as this spins, you get your centrifugal force pulling these governor arms away from each other. That's why the balls are on there, to, the whole centrifugal force and weight and all of that. So the faster you spin, the farther apart these get. And then once they reach a certain limit, there's some sort of device in here. Honestly, this part, how this device is set off, that's where my knowledge gap is. I don't really know. But I know that as the governor spins and it pulls, the centrifugal force pulls these two balls away from each other and therefore moves the arms. Once it hits that limit, it cuts the fuel to the engine. And then as these balls go back together, as it slows down, that limit unlocks and fuel is allowed back in. That's how you reach your maximum speed. Now, Captain Flucky knew that if they were set at the designed max speed, they were probably going to die. They needed to move much faster than that. They needed to give it all they could give. So he told the engine men to disable the governor. So what they did is they took lock wire and they just chained this shit shut. so as it spun, these balls weren't going anywhere. They wanted to, but they wouldn't. And because they wouldn't, this actuator wouldn't get set. And because it didn't get set, there was nothing to cut the flow of diesel into the motor. So it would just go and go and go until something broke. By the way, this governor valve right here, that's where the expression balls to the walls comes from. The balls on top getting thrown out by the centrifugal force. Once you hit max speed, they look like they're going sideways, right? Out towards the walls. Balls to the wall. Neat fact, huh? Alright. Yeah, and then once he got out, this is kind of the fucked up part. So they were getting chased down by this ship on their way out, right? And this ship was closing on them. They got out and into a small fleet of junks, which a junk was just the 1940s thing. It was a junk was a old Chinese fishing boat. They were called junks because they were not very well put together, because the fishermen were kind of broke. So there was a whole fleet of them, a whole bunch of innocent fishermen on these tiny boats. And the Barb, in order to get away from the Japanese vessel chasing them down, they steered into the swarm of junks, which confused the Japanese radar, and then they dove. And then the Japanese got upset, and they could hear it firing upon the junks. So, that kind of sucks, a little bit of collateral damage there. But they got out, and he got the Medal of Honor for it.
The most successful submarine raid of all time at this point. And if you don't know, submarining is called the silent service because they do not talk about what they do. This was so impressive that it became headline news. For this, Flucky was awarded the Medal of Honor, which brings a perfect close to an epic career of commanding submarines, right?
All right, Captain Flucky was awarded the Medal of Honor. Captain Flucky wrote an official letter refusing to accept the Medal of Honor. He turned it in, and as it went up, it got intercepted by the Admiral, who pulled Captain Flucky inside and gently yelled at him a little bit. So, America wanted to give him the Medal of Honor for a few reasons, right? First off, he fucking deserved it. It was very smart what he did, very calculated. It was extremely risky, and it took, he tried to do his best to mitigate those risks by, balls to the wall, all that stuff, going at night, being prepared. But it was still risky. So it was very smart, it was very risky, and it had a huge positive impact destroying that harbor, because now they couldn't hide there anymore because the harbor was found out, and he sank a whole bunch of ships. He caused a ton of damage. The most successful raid. So yeah, they wanted to give him the Medal of Honor for that, for those, good, standard, morally good reasons. But also, America needed heroes, all right? America really needed heroes. They needed people buying war bonds. They needed people in support of the war, because they needed it, all right? They needed heroes. They needed good publicity, because the island fighting was horrific. Those conditions were awful. Not America's fault. Well, I don't say that phrase much. But yeah, not America's fault. It was just what it was. It was awful. They needed a hero. And then Captain Flucky did this. Captain Flucky didn't want the Medal of Honor. His reasons, his morally upstanding reasons, was that he thought the Medal of Honor should only go to those who died doing it. He thought that the ultimate sacrifice earned the Medal of Honor, and anything less wasn't adequate, right? He didn't think he earned it. He also didn't think that the risk that he took, he didn't think it was a suicide run. He thought that he had planned out enough, he had done enough preparation, that it was not strictly suicidal, right? So he didn't think he had earned it, first off. That's the morally upstanding version. Oh, and also, if he got the Medal of Honor, then he got it. And that's good, right? But his crew didn't get the Medal of Honor, and he liked his crew. He wanted his crew to be awarded and all of that. And you can't give a whole crew the Medal of Honor. But what ended up happening is he got the Medal of Honor, and that whole crew, they were the crew of the ship that did the task that got the Medal of Honor. That is still a big deal. And they all got the Presidential Unit Citation, which is like the biggest award of the time. So they did get well awarded. And then his not so morally great reason for doing it, which he's never said this. This is just my suspicions, all right? We can all be, a little bit it's not greedy. It's not God, what is it? Looking out for our best interests. It's not bad to look out for your best interests, all right? Captain Flucky wanted a 5th War Patrol. He really did. Now the problem is, after your 4th War Patrol, you are considered either too risky or not risky enough. You either get scared, you're too cautious, you don't act when you should, or you act all the time and throw yourself into unnecessarily dangerous situations, and you can lose the ship. So they didn't give people a 5th War Patrol. He really, really wanted one. And if he got a Medal of Honor, and the reasoning was that he did something insanely risky, he wasn't going to get his 5th War Patrol. So part of this, the Admiral had him pulled aside, and he basically bargained with the Admiral. And he got not a written promise, but, a verbal, a gentleman's code honor, whatever. He basically traded and agreed and made a deal that was like, okay, I will accept the Medal of Honor if I get a 5th War Patrol. And because the president wanted that Medal of Honor to go to him, and because the American public needed a hero, and it's just one submarine, there's many submarines, this dude has a very impressive record, the Admiral decided, you know what, fine, deal, you get your 5th War Patrol. So yeah, pretty neat. Oh, I'm fairly certain some of the knowledge about that island with that secret harbor with the trade routes and the minefields came from their POW. I can't remember if that's 100% accurate, but
Nah. Lucky Flucky would then request to be able to have a 5th War Patrol with the USS Barb. A request that they granted him despite their fears that he would become either too conservative or too reckless.
Alright, yeah, I paused too early. He just described it. Yep, there we go.
Once they granted him this 5th patrol, he immediately requested that the USS Barb be fitted with rocket launchers. Gotta set a tone.
Oh, God, yeah. So, at this point, no submarine has used rocket launchers, right? They got their torpedoes, they got a 5-inch deck gun, they got a 4-inch deck gun, and they have some small arms on board, maybe. Usually just like a pistol or two or whatever. I think the USS Barb had some small arms and had some rifle-fired grenades on board. Oh God, there's something else I totally I meant to talk about. Okay, first this. So they had a 5-inch gun, 4-inch gun, but there was a rocket launcher just waiting in Hawaii with a bunch of rockets for it that was supposed to go on a surface ship, but that surface ship left for something else without picking up their rocket launcher. So Flucky wanted it. And then the crew, and they said, fine, we'll just replace your 4-inch gun. Because if you have a 4-inch gun and a 5-inch gun, you're going to use the 5-inch, right? You can use both, and that might help you a little bit, but mostly you're just going to use the 5-inch gun. So they replaced his 4-inch gun with a rocket launcher. And Captain Flucky fought against that, actually. He fought pretty hard. He's like, no, I want both. I want a 5-inch gun, a 4-inch gun, and a rocket launcher. I want all of it. And that fight he lost. But I'm glad he fought for it. That's a fucking man of the people right there. But yeah, so he got his rocket launcher. Something I wasn't mentioning. So this dude here, right? I need to stop talking with my hands. You guys can't see it. So Fat Electrician talked about it a little bit. These guys, they were ramming ships, right? Alright, Fat Electrician did talk about this. These guys were fucking pirates, alright? They were, I think it was after the 2nd or 3rd War Patrol. And Captain Flucky, when they pulled into port, Captain Flucky talked to the on-base Marine commander, or a Marine guy, maybe not a commander, but, a Marine dude in charge of training people. And he's like, hey, I want to train my crew on boarding practices. And the Marine guy wasn't, fully convinced. He's like, that sounds like a crazy idea. Let's walk and talk. And so he's like, I want to see your crew. I want to see who I'm going to be training to be a fucking pirate. Which non-Marines, which Navy guys am I going to train to be psychos? Like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And so they were walking and talking, and on their way to the enlisted barracks. And as they're going over there, on the second floor, there's an open window, and you can hear a bit of a party going on. And as they're walking by, a guy is thrown out that second story window and hits the hits the sand, and it's one of his crew members. That party, turns out, is full of people from the USS Barb. So this dude flies out of a second story window, hits the sand, gets up, and then curses at the guys upstairs, yelling something along the lines of, "I didn't think you were actually going to do it," and then just ran back inside without even seeing his captain or the Marine guy. So Flucky and the Marine commander looked at each other. The Marine commander looked, well, surprised but pleased. Very, very Marine behavior there, so it seems like a good fit. And they walk up to up the stairs to the room. They could hear some commotion going on inside, and they knock on the door, and they hear a bunch of, like, the overly loud shh, shh, like shushing noises that drunk people make. And then the honk of a goose. And then somebody cracks the door open, and it's one of his crew members. And they have the very short, polite conversation of introducing that crew member to the Marine commander and asking if they want to show up to do border party training, and that's how they agreed to it and all of that. And then they got trained to be fucking pirates by this Marine guy. So yeah, they had the USS Barb. This was after, like, the second or third war patrol. They were doing crazy stuff, but, like, relatively sane, And then they were getting trained to board enemy vessels. So some of those, like, smaller ships, like the smaller ships that were rammed, yeah. So, like, ships of this size, like a lot of the more civilian ones, or, like, some of these smaller ships were, like, weather boats, so they were military assets. They weren't strictly civilian, but they weren't very well armed and all of that. They were soft targets. So for ships like that, what they would do is they would come up, they would fire machine gun fire over the top of the boats that everybody ran below decks, and they would have their guys go on as a boarding crew, and they would just steal shit. They would just go in, like, okay, technically what they were looking for was charts and documents and maps and all of that, but they would always go into the stateroom and take the Japanese flag and also whatever other knickknacks were their fancy. They would just leave the bottom of the ship alone. They wouldn't go into the bottom because that's where the crew was hiding, and maybe the crew was armed. So they just didn't risk it. They would just steal everything else, though. So they were literally fucking pirates. They would go out, they would shoot shit with torpedoes, they'd drink alcohol, then they'd go topside and they'd raid enemy boats. They were pirates.
Which Uncle Sam actually agreed to because fucking America, making the USS Barb the first submarine to ever be equipped with rockets and to have the capability of attacking a target on land. The harassment just got more maximum.
Ooh, we're already on the 5th War Patrol. Okay, yeah, so he got granted permission to go on the 5th War Patrol. They went out there. They got their rocket launchers. Now, he got his permission granted. He was really good at what he did. He was dangerous no matter where he was. So he just asked if he could go back to, like, an earlier place. I think it was on his 1st or 2nd War Patrol. He was on the, if I remember right, I think it was on the east side of Japan. I might have this backwards, but I'm just going to pretend. I'm just going to be consistent. So I'll say east. On the east side of Japan. Now, the main front for the Navy engagements and all of that was on the west side of Japan. So he wanted to go back to the east side of Japan because he spotted all these targets on land that he could do nothing about, and that bothered him. So now for his 5th War Patrol, he got this rocket launcher, and now he can do something about it. And he had all this time to ruminate and think about what he was going to do. Yeah, angry little gremlin tube coming out of the water. All that time to molt about it. Now he's ready and heavily armed. So the admiral agreed. He's like, yeah, you can go over here. Your orders. Let's see. What are your orders? Make the Japanese Navy think we're opening a second front. Captain Flucky's orders were to cause maximum harassment. His orders were to cause so much of a mess that the Japanese Imperial Navy thought that another front was opening up. So it would pull all their forces, not all of them, but pull their forces away from the actual targets where the Navy was actually attacking, actually cared about, so that they could deal with one submarine doing whatever the fuck they wanted. That was the order. That was the plan. It worked. All right, let's...
So under the command of Lucky Flucky, the USS Barb would go out on its 12th and final war patrol. They would utilize their new rocket launchers to do shore bombardments, much like larger warships. They destroyed multiple enemy factories and other objectives, becoming the first submarine in history to destroy enemy objectives on land, paving the way for what is now modern-day submarine warfare. Medal of Honor revolutionized submarine warfare twice, still not enough though. Back to the...
Okay, so he's... Okay. All of what he said is true. I just want to go into more detail. Yeah, so they were doing shore bombardments. They were... most of the time, they were hitting, ships at sea, right? But now that they had rockets, they could hit the shipyards. They could hit what was building the ships. They could hit the factories. They could hit all of that. And that one target that Captain Flucky really wanted to hit, that he saw that one time, there was this small island off the coast that had a radio tower there. And a small little village or whatever, just to support the radio tower. That radio tower was fairly important. It was bringing in messages, it was sending them out, right? It was fairly important, and he fucking hated that that thing was still there the whole time. So they went out there. If I remember right, they did this in the middle of the day. I could be wrong on that. But they went out there, they were submerged. They popped up, fired a ton of rockets at it, and then put a bunch of people that were trained for boarding parties and went out and boarded ships. They put them into an inflatable boat and started paddling towards this island after they had hit it with rockets. Now, what they were hoping is that they would hit the radio tower, they would hit some of the buildings, and then whoever was still alive would flee onto the other side of the island, somewhere else, whatever, so that his men could get there, capture things, and on site destroy whatever radio stuff was left. But unfortunately, what actually happened is after they fired their rockets, they got their little inflatable boat, they started moving along, they started receiving small arms fire from the island. Now, it wasn't really even close to hitting them, but that means that there were still soldiers alive on the island that were shooting back. And that was too high risk for Flucky and his crew. Because they could take on fucking anything in the water. They could take on any ship, right? But the small arms fire, that's not really their area of expertise. It's not really what they're really trained for and good at. They're just, nope, you know what? Too dangerous. We hit the tower with rockets. That's enough. Let's go. So then they took the guys back on board, they got their inflatable boat down, and they dove. On this island, these people were fucking terrified because they were just out doing their thing, and suddenly rockets started hitting them, destroyed the radio tower. So yeah, they did knock it out. It destroyed the radio tower, blew up their only powered boat that could get them back to the mainland. And when they looked out, there was just this, what they thought was a small cruiser or destroyer just in the middle of, it wasn't there before. And then they started shooting at it. And then it just fucking disappeared somewhere. As the guy, turned around to try to scavenge some more ammo, he turned back and the ship was just gone. They did not even know it was a submarine. They had no idea what was happening. It was a ghost ship, appeared out of nowhere, creamed them, and then left. one of the Japanese guys got into a rowboat and rowed for like this small island was so far off the mainland, it was past the horizon. This guy got into a small rowboat, and because they had no radio signals, no way to call for help, their main boat was broken. He took this rowboat for 14 hours. I think it was 14 hours until he reached the mainland, just to tell somebody that there were people on that tiny island that needed help because a magical destroyer ruined their day. Incredible. And yeah, the Barb also tore up all sorts of stuff on land. They thought that, so from the Japanese side of things, they thought it was a magical destroyer, and then they thought that it was a that aircraft carriers, that American aircraft carriers were moving in and sending air crews in to bomb the place, and then a submarine popped up just to get in on the action before leaving. Because they only saw the submarine, they just assumed the planes were there because they were getting hit by things falling out of the sky at them, because they would angle the rockets up so that large trajectory, more range, whatever. So yeah, they absolutely succeeded. Japanese Imperial Navy thought that America was opening up a second front, and they started moving ships to intercept. They thought there were aircraft carriers out there. Wild. Alright, here's the part.
The battle flag. Okay, I told you each one of these patches means it sunk something, right? Did anybody notice there's a fucking train on...
Yep, alright. There's the train. God, which ones are these? I know one of those is rockets. Oh well. That would have been nice to remember which was which. Oh well.
On it. July 23rd, 1945. The USS Barb and her crew decide that spawn killing supply ships as they leave the harbor was for casuals. They're gonna put a stop to this in the loading screen. They're gonna play a little game of fluck around and find out with the train before it can even drop off its cargo to the ships. But there's a catch. Getting close enough to use the rocket launchers will almost certainly get them caught. So they hatch a...
Also, the rockets were not accurate enough for a moving train. That's a small target that's moving. To really be 100% sure about it, they would have to get on land and go do it. The rockets, it was much more likely that they would miss and then miss their opportunity. So they wanted to go on land.
Plan that they're going to send a small group of men ashore on a little raft. These men would then booby-trap the train tracks with a 55-pound scuttling charge, blowing up the train. And if you don't know, a scuttling charge is an explosive that a ship has on it in case it needs to sink itself to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. Big, very big boom. But there's a problem with that. To detonate it, they can't use a timer because the timing of the train is unpredictable. And they're not willing to leave a man behind to set it off manually. So they seek the help of the man that I can only assume is the most beautiful, slightly alcoholic, broom-fear...
We're gonna get to that. Okay. So yeah, scuttling charge. 55 pounds of high explosives. That is a powerful fucking charge, right? Captain Flucky hated that thing. He hated it. He's like, I don't want this thing around, right? He's like, if I'm using a scuttling charge, it means that the ship is that the ship is about to be captured. We can't get away. It is so badly damaged. It means that I've already lost crew members. We're all going to become POWs, and the Japanese do not treat POWs nicely. Plus, even if that worst case scenario happened, standard operating procedure for something like that, for a submarine getting captured, which has happened before in World War II, it wasn't even to use the scuttling charge. The standard procedure was for the people to go topside, get in life vests, and then one guy still on the boat would open up all the valves to flood the main ballast tanks, and then get out as it was sinking. Same result. I don't know if safer is the right word, because that's pretty risky too, but same result. And a scuttling charge. If you use a scuttling charge and you are topside on the boat or near the boat even, the shock wave from that explosion could still kill a bunch of people. So it was just really fucking dangerous. It was the one guy who went down to open up those valves. It was probably just as dangerous for him, but that's just one guy compared to the whole crew. Yeah, Captain Flucky hated the idea of a scuttling charge being on board. So when he went to take out this train, they were like, "Oh, but what do we use to take it out?" Of course, he threw out scuttling charge. You want that thing fucking gone anyway. Now they had some advantages. Captain Flucky was a smart guy. Graduated high school 15, right? Went to all this stuff. I think his degree was in math. I don't know how much of a degree he got. He did well though. He knew how the numbers worked. And one of their machinist mates on board, one of their mechanics, used to work in train yards and on train lines and stuff like that. And he actually knew the calculations for the estimated weight of a train and how much the railroad ties would bend, not the ties, the railroad, the metal, the tracks, how much they would bend as a loaded train went across them, as a train engine went across them. So what they did is they got Captain Flucky with his brain math, and then this train guy, they worked together to calculate an estimation for, as the Japanese train engine went across the tracks, how far would that train track dip. And then they would get the scuttling, and then they came to
Steering man on the USS Barb, the electrician.
Then they would go to the electrician, thank you very much, and set up a detonator so that as it pushed down, it would set off the charge. And using their math and all of that, they said this number, that is the distance that it's going to bend. That's where you want to put your charge. And with something like 2 inches, like 2 inches of bend, which is pretty significant. I'm going to replay this just a minute.
To leave a man behind to set it off manually. So they seek the help of the man that I can only assume is the most beautiful, slightly alcoholic, broom-fearing man on the USS Barb, the electrician.
Okay. The fat electrician, I think he was Army Reserves, which, respect to the reserves. I don't shit on the reserves here, alright? Not in this house. If you sign up for the reserves, you sign up with the understanding that there is a fairly good chance you will get deployed. So I count that as real military, alright? I respect it. But Army electrician and civilian electrician is not the same thing as Navy electrician. So what he said, he said slightly alcoholic. He said broom fearing. Yeah, that's not giving it enough credit. Yeah, so electricians on board. God, these poor electricians. So on a submarine, right? You got, on a modern submarine, you have your forward guys, your forward area guys. Spell out that acronym. So forward area guys, or coners, which don't do work. And then you have engineering department. And, well, you also got cooks. Cooks do work. And then you have engineering department, which is MDiv, A-Gang, RC-Div, I guess RL-Div, and the ETs. And what? Fuck, I've been talking so long I can't remember what rates I just said. All right, so you got your standard mechanics, your nuclear mechanics, nuclear electricians, nuclear operators, and your lab boys. You do not have standard electricians. You have standard mechanics and standard mechanics and nuclear mechanics. You only have nuclear electricians. A-Gang, by the way. So I was MDiv, nuclear mechanics. We were good people. Sometimes. The A-Gangers, the standard mechanics, fucking love those dudes. Those dudes are straight retarded most of the time. Love those guys. Some of the friendliest and meanest people you'll ever meet. Right, anyway, so MDiv, we would handle all of the steam piping, all of the condensate piping, we would handle all of the mechanical systems that related to the power plant, and some of the adjoining systems, right? The more standard A-Gang would handle all the other mechanical systems on the boat. They had a much higher workload than we did. We had a much more controlled like controlled systems, more like nuclear systems, power systems. Our stuff had a lot more paperwork, a lot more requirements, but we had a lower workload than the A-gangers did. They had less scrutiny, but a lot more work, which sucks for them. I respect them though. The fucking electricians. The electricians had all of the power plant electrician stuff, all those wires and all that shit. They had all of that controlled stuff, plus all of the standard stuff, forward and aft. Their workload was obscene. God, I like talking big game sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. I felt so bad for those fucking electricians. They were always working, all the time. Some of the angriest people, some of them were quite good looking. I'll give the handsome or the beautiful or whatever he called them. And fuck me, could they drink. They were really good at it. Not as good as RC did. Not as good as the reactor technicians, surprisingly enough. Those dudes were on point. But the electricians were on... They were on the level, man. They were nuts. So yeah, sorry, that's modern. We're not talking about modern. So World War II. World War II electricians, same thing, right? They had the engine room, they had forward, they had to know what they were doing, and we knew this guy was drinking, and he was the one hooking up the timer on that depth charge, that pressure plate thing. All right.
He's able to cook up a homemade pressure switch that they can put underneath the railroad tie, so when the train drives by, it'll put enough pressure that it'll detonate the scuttling charge. So the small team goes out, makes it to land, sets the charge, becoming the first and only Americans to actually officially invade the main islands of Japan during World War II. They then get back in the raft and head back.
Oh, I forgot how much he summarizes all of this. Yes, all of that happened. Going into a little bit more detail. So the USS Barb came up. They got as close as they could without beaching, with, you know, all the lights off at night. They waited a few days watching it at night to make sure that the train was on a schedule so that they could time when they could go. And then they waited until it was a moonless night with cloud cover. They had all of the lights off. They took the submarine as close as they could. They got the inflatable boat out. They got the crew on it. They took off. They got to shore, they ran up the beach, they hid their boat behind a few bushes, they found a guard tower, and they're like, oh shit, if this guy walks around or something, he can find our boat, he can see us. So one guy went up there with a knife, went all the way up the tower, looked over, there was a guard in the tower, and he was snoring. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna trust he's gonna stay like that. So they went back down quietly. And then kept going for those train tracks. There was they stopped. There was a single road. They knew the road was there, but it was super dark. So they're getting ready across the road. First guy goes. He immediately falls into a drainage ditch, eats shit, gets back up, runs across the road, falls into another drainage ditch that he didn't see, and then everybody behind him does the exact same thing. Then they keep going. They get to the train tracks. They have shovels with them, and they hit the shovel into it, and it makes a loud ass noise. And then they realize that the support, the little mounds or whatever that train tracks are built on, here in the States it's mostly gravel. These, since it's Japan island, it's right by the coast, this is like rocks, sand, and seashells. So as you push a shovel into that, it is loud. So they immediately stop with the shovels and they start working by hand. So now they're pushing rocks and seashells and all of this out of the way by hand, and it's cutting up their fingers. So all you hear is like slight shuffling and like really quiet. Like, oh, fuck, shit, fuck, tits. It just as they're shuffling this stuff away. They get the hole down to where they want it. They slide the scuttling charge in. It's still deactivated. It's still, safety is on this thing, right? And then, per Captain Flucky's explicit orders, all but one guy fall back, and that one guy sets it to the right length that they agreed to, and arms it. And then he goes back to the rest, and he's like, actually, I want to look at it again. And then he goes forward, and he changes it, so instead of 2 inches, it's like 1.5. Then he goes back. And then everybody goes back to the scuttling charge. And they bring it just an inch away from the track. Fuck math. And then they all go back. And they repeat this until the scuttling charge. That fuse that was supposed to be 2 inches away from the track, per all the math, per all that hard work that those two guys did, now it is like a 1/4 inch away from the track. If you sneeze too hard, you are blowing up everybody with a 55-pound bomb of high explosive. And they're like, yeah, that's good enough. Let's get the fuck out of here. So they all, like, sprint back, eat shit in that drainage ditch, keep going, grab the boat, get into the water, start paddling, and immediately realize that they can't see anything. Turns out the USS Barb is very well hidden in the nighttime. So these guys are paddling back. They're trying to get back to the boat. They just know that the boat is away from the land, so they're just moving away. And they don't know it, but they're moving at kind of an angle, so they're not really going straight towards USS Barb. And Captain Flucky's sitting there, and he can see the rowboat. They just can't see him, and he knows they can't see him because they're going the wrong way. They're going sideways. But he doesn't want to make any noise to get their attention because he doesn't know they're right off of mainland Japan. And then they hear a train whistle. And Captain Flucky's, oh, fuck it. And he grabs a microphone and he hits a spotlight. He's like, row for your goddamn lives. So then he turns on the spotlight. And these guys' arms are now moving like egg whiskers. So they're just paddle as fast as they can. Right before they get back to the USS Barb, the train comes out of the tunnel, barreling down the tracks, hits the... I'll let Fat Electrician say it.
To the USS Barb, and the train comes by. The men reported that the engine of that train went 200 feet in the air, marking the first and only flight test of a freight train. Thomas the train engine would then find out that gravity's a motherfucker, get bitch slapped with the planet before tumbling into the ocean, officially giving the USS Barb bragging rights of being the only naval vessel to sink a freight train. But the best bragging right...
Alright, slight exaggeration. That is the initial story I heard as well. Parts of the train went 200 feet into the air. Parts of it, not the whole thing, parts. Like shrapnel and all that. Like 6 inches of pieces of shrapnel, so fucking big pieces, right? And it did not fall into the ocean. It was like 1/4 mile from the sea. Because you don't want a train track right near the ocean, because then the waves and all that will wash it out. But yeah, it was still considered sunk, because at this point, if a submarine took something out, it sunk blank. It sunk whatever it hit. There's a case of a submarine sinking a plane when a kamikaze rammed a submarine as it was diving, but the submarine survived, and obviously the kamikaze didn't. And now, USS Barb, there's a case of a submarine sinking a train, because they took out the train. So, yeah, really fucking cool stuff. Oh, and when that train hit, they knew it was running at night. They knew from their POW, they asked about this train, they knew from the POW that at nighttime, the only people who were allowed to use that train were military people under orders, so moving military equipment or personnel. So they knew there were no civilians on that train. After that blew up, the Japanese propaganda, they had the, what's it, G.I. Jane? Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose, it was a Japanese... Windigoon made a good video on Tokyo Rose, I recommend it. So Tokyo Rose was a Japanese American. She visited Japan, and then the war broke out, and then she was stuck there. And because she could speak both English and Japanese, they had her as a broadcaster for a radio station, so that when Marines and Navy guys, mostly Marines, because a lot of Navy guys weren't close enough to get the signals on their radio, but the Marines were on the islands and all that. When they tuned into the radio, they could tune in to listen to Tokyo Rose talk about what's going on. And so, since it was the Japanese government was telling her what to say, it was propaganda channel, anti-American, all of that. Tokyo Rose, though, what a this person, she had balls. She would give advice and recommendations like, hey, to really demoralize the American troops, we should say these things. But because there was such a culture difference, the what she was actually doing was kind of hyping up the Americans and being kind of supportive of them, but only because of the American culture at that time, and it was different from Japanese culture. So the Japanese people telling her what to say, the Japanese government, they thought she was being serious because that would be insulting to them. That would demoralize them if they were in that position. They didn't realize the culture difference. Like calling American Marines like dogs of war and all of that. She convinced the Japanese government that that was a big insult, and the Japanese government believed it because that in their culture, being called a dog would be a huge insult. But to the Marines, these fucking 17, 19-year-olds who are like trained to kill, ready to go out, find their country, and then some attractive Japanese lady voice comes on and calls them dogs of war. It's like, it was very, it pumped them up. It worked. Right. Way off topic. Oh, that's what I was talking about. So, after this train sank, yeah, after this train was sunk, the Tokyo Rose, their Japanese propaganda, said that a whole bunch of civilians died on this train. But, they didn't believe it, and turns out after the war, with the official records, no civilians on that train. But after the scuttling charge went off, so the whole thing didn't go straight up, right? But it derailed it, it damaged it severely, it flung it off the tracks, and then like 15 or 20 cars of both military equipment and personnel just slammed into the lead engine, which was now suddenly stationary after going at like 50 miles per hour. So it just wrecked everything. So yeah, very effective. And it cut off those two parts of the island from each other, so resupplying each other was a huge burden. That was very significant to the hurting the Japanese war effort.
Of all is the fact that under the command of Eugene Lucky Flucky, not a single sailor was killed or seriously injured under his command during his time on the USS Barb.
Captain Lucky Flucky, he blew up a secret harbor, he sank a train, he got a obscene amount of tonnage and ships sunk, he revolutionized submarine warfare. Captain Lucky Flucky said his two proudest achievements were that none of his men received Purple Hearts, nobody was hurt or killed, and he saved 14 POWs from the water. Those were his two proudest moments. Oh god, I forgot. I said like, Jesus, 2.5 hours ago, that he threw out the rule book for how to punish people. I said that was going to come up later. I totally forgot about it. It was like the third or fourth war patrol. They were on the surface, they were doing whatever, they saw a plane, they did a crash dive, and then they heard pounding on the hatch after they shut it right before they dove. And so they real quick opened the hatch, pulled down one of their crewmen that they didn't know was up there, shut the hatch and dove. Turns out that guy, so as they were small crew, right? So as they were, popping up on the surface, some people would go up and be like, hey, can I go topside for a bit? I want to get some fresh air, I want to get smoke, I want to enjoy, sunlight. And Cam Flucky never said no to it, He's like, yeah, of course you can come on up. As long as it wasn't like a mechanic wanting to go up during combat, right? Like there's, well, you got other places to be and it's kind of dangerous and all that. But, during like standard just traveling, it was like, yeah, he never said no. So sometimes they stopped asking. They would just like kind of go up and say hi, enjoy the weather, then go back down. Well, this guy went up and nobody noticed that he went up there. And then they saw the plane and they went to crash dive and they all went below deck and he didn't make it in time until he pounded on the door before they dove, on the hatch before they dove. So he didn't get him in trouble, or he didn't like discipline him or anything like that. because he figured the punishment was almost drowning, almost being lost at sea. That was punishment enough. And then just from now on, make your presence known, ask permission before you go up. That story is pretty good by itself. I just realized when you compare it to everything else the Barb did, everything I've been talking about for almost 3 hours now, that story sounds like a nothing burger. Yeah.
The USS Barb would then be given to the Italian Navy, where it served until
Oh, we're missing a step here. Okay, so after the train sank, before the end of the war, they went out, they rocketed a few more things, just to just use up all their rockets. They had them, they were going to use them, so they did. They used up all their torpedoes sinking ships. They used up all of their, almost all of their 5-inch and 4-inch shells. They had a few, sorry, not 4-inch. They traded that out for a rocket launcher. Almost all their 5-inch shells. They had a few left. Thing is, Captain Flucky made a bet with somebody that he was going to sink 15 ships on his 5th war patrol. And he had a day left before, in the area, before he had to head back. And he had sunk 14. So he really wanted that last one, because he wanted to win that bet. And they came across a ship. And he was so hyped for it. They fired machine gun fire across the top. They pulled up close. They fired one 5-inch shell an inch below the waterline. And then they watched it sink. And he was so hyped about it. It was a small, I think it was a weather boat. It was a very small boat for either weather or mapping. And then as they were driving home, he was happy he won the bet. And then it dawned on him. And he said that sinking that ship was his greatest regret. Because it was only after he sank it, because he was so focused on winning that bet, on getting that 15th ship, that he had not considered, what if he stole it? They were trained to board ships. They knew how to do it. They were on their way out. They weren't even in a dangerous area anymore. They had finished their maximum harassment and they were on their way out. There weren't any enemy planes or ships or whatever anywhere near them. He was thinking about the possibilities. They could spray fire across the top, get their boarding crew in, take out all the levels but the last one, yell down commands, take prisoners, and then lash the ship to the back of the Barb and tow it back to, they had a Guam or Hawaii? I think it was Guam, yeah. Tow it back to Guam. And then there would be official, God, what is it called? Well, it would be commandeered, like official government property stolen from the Japanese Navy, and they could use that as like a parade boat. What else? And the possibilities were just rattling through his mind that he's as he's sitting there, now upset that he won his bet. But they did rush back to Guam because he took a 5th war patrol. That means there was some other guy out there who wanted to be a captain who couldn't, right? Now, really, that doesn't matter. You know, there are other ships for people to captain on. You know, I don't believe in that whole, like, well, if I do it, that means somebody else won't do it. That's kind of a weird way of looking at things. But now that Captain Flucky had finished his patrol, he finished what he wanted to do. Now that he was done, he wanted to get back as soon as possible because he knew the war was about to end. It was almost over. I don't think he heard about the nukes at this point. I don't think that happened yet. But he rushed back so that another captain could get command so that they could start a war patrol. So that they can, on their official paperwork for their career, that they can mark down that they were the captain of a submarine and they went on a war patrol during wartime. Because that is big. That is big for a resume, especially when all of the people around you have gone, but you haven't. That really hurts you. So he was trying to get back as soon as possible. just help somebody else out. And they did, and they got there, and then as they were doing the light maintenance before they went back out, war ended. That's kind of a shame.
1972. It was then sold for scrap for a price of $100,000. Because shitty decisions. Speaking of shitty decisions, there's a bunch of other websites that are now stealing my shirt designs, but if you actually want to support me, the only place you can get my shirts is from my merch store at thefatelectrician.com or from Bunk.
Alright. Stick with me here. So this logo, right? You got your nuke, your bomb, and the 2 lightning bolts, and all of it is in a white circle. It took me months. I'm pretty sure I've seen most, if not all, of his videos. It took me months to realize that that's what the logo was, right? To realize it was a bomb. I'd only, like, passing glances at it. I thought that these 2 black marks were eyes, and this drag was like a gap, like jagged on the sides, right? And then this bit was a bit of a respirator. I thought this was a mask. I thought this was the coolest looking mask ever, right? I thought it was a face. No, it's a bomb. Alright.
Bunker branding. Anyone else is just trying to steal my shit. The highly requested USS Texas design and the most requested fur musket design go live on April 1st. That is all. Quack bang out.
If you're
Alright. That's it from me. Yeah. Good channel. Love that video. It's not my favorite, but it's the one I have the most to talk about. I do love it. I love that video. My favorite. Let me just slide through it. If I can find it in here. Cassius Clay. I did not know about this dude, right? This video is fucking awesome. Watch this one. If anybody is watching this video, my stream, whatever, and they haven't seen Fat Electrician's video on Cassius Clay, watch it. It is awesome. I won't be watching it on stream. I won't be reviewing whatever. I had a lot to talk about with the USS Barb. That's why I reacted to that one. I had a lot to talk about. Really want to talk about it. I've been wanting to talk about it for a long time, right? Like, probably a few months. But I got this other video I'm making. It's still in the works. Let's, and I was like, I should finish that one first. And then, once that's out, then I'll do it. And I'll give it my all, be more prepared and all that stuff. And then, but that didn't happen. Work got in the way, all this stuff got in the way. And I decided, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to talk about it. I still really want to talk about it. Oh, that's me live. Look at that. I wonder what happens if I watch this. Right, okay. My channel, I guess, shill for myself. How did I get to 71? Whatever. This is my most popular one. I liked making it. You know what? I'm proud of these 3. This one less so. But I'm proud of these 3. The rest of these, if anybody's watching, don't bother. The rest of these aren't good. Don't bother. I enjoyed making them at the time. You know what? Scratch that. I am very proud of my Fort Armistead video. I put in some work for that one. It was fun. I think those 20 views were well earned. Alright. I want to see what happens when I watch my own stream. Alright. Oh, it's a delay. I want to see what happens when I watch my own stream. Oh my god, is that actually my voice? Oh, there's so much background fuzz. Oh, it's a delay. No wonder nobody's watching. I want to see what happens when I watch my own stream. Oh my god, is that actually my voice? Oh no. Oh, there's so much background fuzz. Oh, it's a delay. No wonder nobody's watching. I want to see what happens when I watch my own stream. Oh my god, is that actually my voice? Oh no. Oh, there's so much background fuzz. Oh, it's a delay. It's so little. I want to see what happens when I watch my own stream. Oh my god. God, is that actually my voice? Oh no. Okay, that's enough of that. There's so much background. Oh, I got one viewer. I'm my own viewer. Look at that. Alright, this was fun, mate. I think I'm done. Have a good one.